Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 The Value of Batman. Catwoman glanced at her old lover, appreciating his complete return. Honestly, she felt a bit resentful now, as she had no excuse to confront Shilvity. Pushing Master Bruce behind her, she reluctantly smiled and walked with Shilvity to the other side to discuss the credit. Uncle Bruce was incredibly embarrassed. While he was undoubtedly wealthy, much of his money was dead money, like shares in Wayne Enterprises, Quinn Enterprises, Merlyn Enterprises, and even Lex Luthor Enterprises. Unwritten rules prohibited these shares from being easily liquidated without legitimate reasons. Furthermore, his global real estate was also difficult to sell. For things like Swiss ski resorts and Belgian wineries, there was no immediate prospect of finding a buyer. He had largely invested his income in technological equipment, much like Thea had in this respect, except that his basic equipment was already complete, while Thea was just getting started. The ongoing maintenance of this equipment required a significant amount of money. He and Thea were strikingly similar, both looked glamorous, but were actually incredibly broke. So, faced with the aggressive Ms. Shiva, he could only offer moral support to his former lover's predicament. Everyone in the conference room listened in silence as Ms. Shiva and Catwoman haggled over the price. "We agreed to a month's delivery, and you're 3 days late. You definitely can't pay the full amount. I haven't asked for your travel expenses yet. Do you know how hard I worked to find you? I didn't even rest after cutting my finger." The two women discarded their usual coolness and elegance. At this crucial moment that would determine Gotham's fate, they chatted endlessly about money, and money. Ahem, Master Bruce said, speechless at how they were treating him like commodities, handing him over and selling him. He coughed twice to try to distract everyone in the room. "What you said earlier about rescuing citizens was very profound. Add me to the chat room and let's continue," but everyone ignored him. It was a rare opportunity to read gossip, so why not indulge in it? Gotham wasn't going to die anytime soon, so a few minutes wasn't going to matter. Led by Thea, everyone ignored the Master's gaze and continued to watch the two women on the other side with rapt interest. Catwoman, soon in the wrong, gave in. She pulled out her phone and painedly transferred money. Her usually sturdy fingers were visibly trembling slightly. A crisp, beeping phone chime echoed through the room. Lady Shiva glanced at the screen with satisfaction. "Not bad, kitty, you're quite wealthy. That's it for the down payment. Remember to send me the money at the beginning of next month." Without even glancing at Catwoman's expression, as if she'd lost her father, Lady Shiva glanced around, spotted Thea, and waved. "I've been away for a long time. I don't know if my daughter misses me. I'm leaving now." Lady Shiva put her phone in her pocket, tossed her long, raven hair behind her, and walked away with a dashing demeanor. What did this mean? Did I really graduate from elementary school? Not even a certificate or anything like that. Thea knew she had a daughter, rumored to be incredibly talented, but she wasn't sure if that was true. She felt a bit reluctant to see this older sister, whom she'd been with for 6 months, leave. "The point is, I'm in need of a capable fighter, so why are you running away? Just wait 2 more minutes, and I'll get to the point. But on second thought, if I had to leave, I'd leave. Catwoman's experience showed me this money-obsessed guy couldn't afford her. It must have cost Thea a fortune to teach me." Mr. Wayne, are you recovered? Thea quickly asked Batman beside her. This was the strongest fighter yet, the subtext being, "Can you fight now?" Bruce was incredibly intelligent, so she understood immediately. But understanding was enough, but objective facts couldn't be ignored. She raised her cane. "I can walk fine now. Damn, you're so funny. This means you're still injured. So why did you come back? To pretend to be perfectly present?" Thea felt as if the entire world consciousness was mocking her. She'd finally gotten 2 key figures back, but one had fled, and the other was still debuffed. They'd circled back to square one. Did they still have to rely on these people? She didn't know how much of the meeting he'd heard before, but Thea recounted it briefly. "Mr. Wayne, do you think large-scale rainfall and the neutralization of radiation will change the shallow evolution of the augmented humans? Call me Bruce. I'll always remember Ms. Thea's help to Gotham," Bruce said, standing up politely to express his gratitude. "As for your proposal, We can do this. I developed a special wavelength trigger. This sound wave is harmless to normal humans. We just need to test the augmented human data and tune it to a specific wavelength to emit infrasound specifically targeting them. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but I think it should be able to stun them. This clearly demonstrates the value of Batman. Much of his combat prowess lies in his intelligence. Earning over 10 self-taught doctorates is no joke. No wonder the Ninja Master values him so highly. To have learned so much in such a short life is undoubtedly a top talent. His methods sounded far superior to Thea and the others' dry ice and boric acid spraying. The two quickly engaged in a lively discussion. Felicity, standing nearby, was initially a bit embarrassed by her idol, but seeing how lively they were, she happily joined in. This put a strain on the remaining scientifically illiterate people in the room. Aside from Catwoman, who was still worried about her small fortune and wondering where to pull off a major crime tonight to recoup her losses, the others were completely bewildered. They wanted to leave, but were afraid of being assigned any tasks, so they could only listen in a daze. Batman was delighted. He had learned so much, yet no one appreciated it. His only confidant was an 800-year-old villain. Normally, having no place to display his vast knowledge was a real bummer. Talking to these seemingly illiterate people around him about the transformations of elements and wavelengths and frequencies was like talking to a wall. But today, when he met the Star City duo, he found them incredibly clear-minded and quick-witted. Most importantly, they understood him. It hadn't been easy. Batman had initially been somewhat upset about returning but not being able to fight, but now that he'd discovered his wisdom could be put to good use, his initial resentment had turned to joy. As they chatted, he expressed a fondness for Star City's education. The educational standards in his own Gotham were far too low, as Robin, who was nearly asleep beside him, could see. Shouldn't he send him to Star City to study? Robin had mentioned going to university earlier, so it seemed like something he could do. He hadn't realized that Thea and Felicity were also largely self-taught, with nothing to do with Star City. Chapter 102 Gotham is about to change. The next day, everyone rushed to the Gotham Weather Monitoring Center, which controlled 3 nearby weather satellites and could monitor cloud formations at all times. Of course, as a major capitalist city, the monitoring center was no exception. Wayne Enterprises invested heavily in the center's research annually. Bruce preferred to remain invisible, so the coordination was provided by the elderly black man, Lucius. Ever since thwarting Talia's plot at the Wayne board meeting, this black man, or rather, a grandfather, had felt incredibly refreshed. His back and legs no longer ached. He could climb the 100-story Wayne Enterprises building in one breath. Still, he couldn't. With Batman's successful return, the two of them secretly met, and his energy was completely different, his steps almost breezy. Hearing that Thea needed to use the weather station to observe some cloud formations, he personally intervened, even though he had no idea what she was up to. There was really nothing to discuss, they were simply giving everyone at the weather center the day off, free to use the equipment. Thea and Bruce, disguised as a police officer, were still discussing the final plan. Ever since hearing Thea's theory about higher crime rates on cloudy days, Bruce had to admit he was quite moved. He was a self-taught psychology graduate, and while the theory might seem outrageous, it certainly made sense. His habitual thinking hadn't caught on to it. Anyway, they needed to reduce the trace amounts of radiation in the air, so they had to fire a few rounds, so let's do it. Felicity, start spreading the dry ice, Thea instructed her top lieutenant from her perch on the high chair at the weather station. The drone they were controlling this time was different from the previous small planes. It was a Wayne Enterprises designed civilian aircraft capable of carrying missiles. This blatant attempt to exploit a legal loophole was simply fantastic. The drone ascended above the clouds and began spraying dry ice. Ground-based artillery would have had a similar effect. A conservative estimate for this trip was over $1 million, but since Thea wasn't paying, she didn't care. Lucius was just a worker, and he could easily handle tens of millions without blinking an eye. Even a small amount seemed like a lot, but when it was distributed among the shareholders, it was nothing. Collective wealth was squandered like this. That's the beauty of modern capital operations. It's hard to tell who's losing and who's gaining. Only after the drone took off did Thea realize that, as a small shareholder, she'd wasted her share of the money on this flight. She felt a little annoyed, but seeing Bruce watching with indifference, she couldn't say anything. Felicity piloted the drone, circling Gotham twice until all the dry ice had been sprayed, then returned to the monitoring center. The already thick clouds deepened even further, hovering heavy and dark across the sky. It looked like rain was coming, but as if someone was holding it back, a full 10 minutes passed without the much-anticipated rain falling. It was quite stubborn. Honestly, Gotham's strange weather gave Thea a bit of a scare. Anywhere else, clouds this thick would have been a torrential downpour. "Director, tell your men to fire," Thea rubbed her chin, ready to fight to the bitter end. "I won't retreat until the rain comes." By this time, all of Gotham was completely obscured by a dark cloud. The lights in the surveillance center came on, and scattered lights could be seen on nearby buildings. Boom, boom, several cannon shots rang out. Each round of these rain bombs was clearly priced at $200,000. If you asked Thea how she knew, she could say Gordon was signing the contracts. The old commissioner had always upheld the principles of fairness and justice. He believed that so-called police community cooperation couldn't just be financed by Wayne Enterprises. He signed 5 contracts on behalf of the Gotham government. In less than 10 seconds, another $1 million was thrown out. The original dark cloud disappeared, replaced by a pitch black, void-like black. The sky was filled with a quiet atmosphere, and everyone in the surveillance center was a little nervous. Just as Thea was about to fire 5 more rounds, a low rumble finally echoed in the sky. Boom. The sound was initially soft, almost inaudible without listening carefully, but it quickly grew louder. The water vapor condensation rate in the air has reached 179%. Felicity, who had been monitoring the various data points, said immediately when she saw the number begin to rise sharply. The monitoring station in the western suburbs indicates gusts have reached force 5, a familiar-looking agent reported. The positive charge in the updraft has exceeded 450% of normal, said Bruce, disguised as a police officer. As the various monitoring data came in, Thea knew the rain was definitely coming, though the clouds were still gathering. Once it did, it was sure to be a torrential downpour. "Barbara, start our recorded announcement and play it several times," Thea instructed Barbara, who was embracing Robin. Of course, the recording was just for show. It was actually Felicity, following her previous plan, photoshopped a second mayoral announcement, urging citizens to stay home and stay indoors. Sometimes Thea felt that if he stayed in Gotham for a few more months, the imprisoned mayor's approval ratings would reach new highs, perhaps even winning re-election. Initially, upon hearing that they were not treating the mayor as a cadre, the stoic Batman objected, but after hearing that this wasn't the first time, he reluctantly acquiesced. Boom, a deafening roar of thunder finally echoed over the ancient city. There was no need for anyone to do anything now, everything had been done. Few citizens would venture out in such weather. If such a freak were to happen, being struck dead would be a sign of low IQ. The thunder roared for a full 10 minutes, and large raindrops began to pour down densely over the city. The glass in the surveillance center crackled with raindrops. The hidden world boss that Thea had previously suspected hadn't appeared, proving that Gotham wasn't some devilishly sealed place, but merely a cumulus cloud formed by a unique topography. She could now loudly declare this episode of Into Gotham a complete success. Everyone should trust science instead of superstition. She stood by the window, watching the raindrops pound the reinforced glass, leaving streaks of smudges. This wasn't the result of the surveillance center's cleaning staff neglecting to clean the glass, but rather pollutants carried down from the clouds to the ground by the rain. Will Gotham be different tomorrow? Master Bruce stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the distance, his tone tinged with worry and anticipation. It definitely will. Thea continued to stare out the window without turning back. She was certain of this. After all, millions had been spent, and it would be ridiculous if it had no effect. The city would definitely be different in every way after the rain. Chapter 103 The world has really changed. A thunderstorm raged over Gotham for a day and a night. When the rain abated, Thea had the old director fire 2 more rounds into the sky, aiming to disperse all the cumulus clouds. This day's free time couldn't be wasted, figuring the Arkham villains wouldn't likely launch a surprise attack during a thunderstorm. A few science-savvy individuals practiced martial arts, while the remaining technically savvy individuals helped Batman build a sonic weapon. Most of the previous equipment had been taken or destroyed by Bane after the Batcave was exposed. Fortunately, Bruce's brilliant mind was still there, and he had secured some equipment from the AOR, and the group rolled up their sleeves and began to work. Bruce's long experience in machining meant he had exceptional manual skills, and Thea's imaginative ability to construct a magnetic skateboard also showed she possessed advanced machining skills. Felicity, having already trained in Star City, was familiar with the work, and she joined in mid-sentence, and the three of them were busy. They were wearing work clothes and glasses, towels wrapped around their necks, tinkering with welding torches and hammers. This scene struck a chord with the unscientific gaze of a few people. "You two billionaires, you've left the ranks of the bourgeoisie. Are you planning to defect to the proletariat? Will you get a certificate of merit next May Day?" Barbara thought, figuring this wasn't the kind of upper-class life she dreamed of. She'd better stick to her petty bourgeoisie and not try to break into the upper echelons. Halfway through the process, the usually solitary and silent Miss Firefly joined in, significantly accelerating the progress. It was a shame to see her born in the United States. She was a natural-born top welder, mastering every temperature and heat, and crucially, she wasn't afraid of fire. To preserve her beautiful face, Thea wore 2 layers of protective gear, and Master Bruce, eager to maintain his handsome, middle-aged appearance, both were heavily covered. Miss Firefly, however, showed no such scruples. Sparks splashed on her face, extinguished without a reaction. Her skill was so impressive that Thea wondered if she'd graduated from Langxiang. With the equipment complete, the next phase of testing began. Just as Thea was considering braving the rain to capture a humanoid, Leela struck gold. For unknown reasons, one of her agents, while retreating, had found a severed humanoid arm, wrapped it in cloth, and brought it back. Later, upon hearing about the radiation, they peed their pants and quickly handed it over to Leela. Everyone gathered in the lab to examine the arm. In reality, when the humanoid emerged that day, they hadn't engaged in direct combat. Only Thea had shot and killed one from a distance, while the others had only seen it from afar. Seeing the arm up close today only made them realize the danger. "Is this a fusion of some animal?" Felicity asked, pointing to the claws on her arm. "Looks like some kind of lizard." Batman, a man of encyclopedias, observed it and offered his own conclusion. The others, no longer bothering to dwell on the animal, began measuring the traces of radiation from the body and searching for unique biological wavelengths. At this stage, Thea was of little help. Her current level was barely above the bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, but less than a master's. Her understanding of genetics was only vague. It seemed she needed to study harder. After the Gotham incident, she should study hard for a while. The Princeton Library would be her permanent home for the foreseeable future. Since she couldn't help, she decided to learn and observe Bruce's deductions. Regardless of whether she understood them or not, Thea recorded the deductions. She occasionally exchanged quiet words with Felicity. Although she majored in computer science, she had dabbled in a wide range of subjects and could barely keep up with Batman's thinking. Barbara and her husband thought that Batman had brought glory to Gotham this time, and that the Star City duo weren't all-knowing. Even though they didn't understand anything, they were still cheerfully accompanying him. Catwoman had been in a bad mood the past 2 days, ever since Shiva half-forced her to steal her life savings. She'd stopped watching after less than 2 minutes, hiding in a corner, lost in thought. Now her man was about to be taken away, and her money had already been stolen. The pain was indescribable. And the problem wasn't over yet. With most of her savings, combined with her recent crime spree, she'd barely made a down payment. Faced with astronomical debts, how would she survive the rest of her life? Looking out the window at the thunderstorm, she wondered if she should take advantage of the dark, rainy night and strong wind to go out and do a few more jobs. But then she remembered Bruce had returned. He'd always opposed her actions. Before, he'd been so far away, but now that he was back, committing more crimes would easily damage their relationship. Talia had been singing "Give Me an Eagle, a Mighty Man in Arkham," using all her might to pull people toward her. Then, she pushed them out, and both of them were doomed. After much deliberation, she had no other choice. She had no intention of borrowing money from Thea to pay off a debt. She had to pay it back. Catwoman, who grew up in the slums, didn't have the concept of pre-consumption. In that sense, she was quite traditional. The rain stopped around midnight that night, and the next morning, everyone went outside. Thea, whose sleep schedule had gradually returned to normal, arrived early, wondering if Gotham's feng shui could be changed. Sewage could be seen flowing from high to low into the sewers on the streets. Thea had no idea what the black rainwater that fell to the ground was made of. She mentally told Gordon to give the city workers a raise. The workload looked enormous. Fortunately, Killer Croc had been apprehended, otherwise, this sewage would have heightened his aura of rot. Checking her watch, it was 5:15. The heroes had all arrived outside. Master Bruce, after a busy night, was in good spirits, his lips pursed as he gazed eastward. It was said he only slept an hour a night, but she wondered if that was true. She'd go back and ask Catwoman about it. Thea's thoughts were all over the place. "Here they come," exclaimed Commissioner Gordon, who loved this land to the core. First a wisp, then a streak, and finally a full beam of sunlight gradually shone over a land that hadn't seen the sunrise in a long time. Blinded by the scorching sun, Thea held up her hands to block most of her vision. Countless golden rays filtered through her fingers, illuminating her whole body with a radiant glow. The sun slowly rose, radiating a burst of light, lifting the last wisp of mist from Gotham's sky. Ho-ha! Thea covered her face with her hands. Not knowing why she wanted to laugh. She felt a surge of strength. Arkham and Bane were all consigned to the dustbin. Chapter 104, Second Attack on Arkham. Her smile was contagious. Barbara and her partner embraced for a long moment. Lila, too, gazed at the morning glow, a sweet smile playing on her lips as she thought of someone else. "Old man, have I really been wrong all these years?" Bruce approached Gordon and whispered, his tone unfathomable, a mixture of joy, excitement, frustration, and perhaps even loss. The question left the old director, always lacking quick wit, at a loss for words. But after all his years, he knew who the question was directed at, so he could only vaguely say, maybe it's perspective. Women and men see things differently. Fearing he might undermine his conviction, the old director racked his brains to come up with an excuse, then added, "She's young, too, with ideals and aspirations. It's wonderful to be young." Bruce looked at Thea, standing gracefully in the distance, facing the morning glow. With his experience of meeting so many women, he was moved by the image. This was a lightless love, simply admiration. Perhaps it's true that men and women have different perspectives. Bruce could only accept this fact and rekindle his shattered faith. Otherwise, given his mental state, he'd be instantly turned to the dark side by suddenly being told that all his years of hard work were meaningless. "I have to apologize. You entrusted your daughter to me earlier, but my focus is on Robin. I'll pay more attention to Barbara from now on." He also wanted to see if there were really such significant differences in how men and women handled problems, and he happened to have 2 test subjects to experiment with. Old Gordon didn't know whether to thank him or say something else about his concern for his daughter. His selfish desire was for his daughter to live a peaceful life. Honestly, as a father, he wasn't happy about her embarking on this heroic path. Barbara's previous slacking off, her martial arts training mediocre, was partly due to his indulgence. But now that Bruce had made it clear that he would hold his daughter to the highest standards, he could only smile wryly and say it was okay. Besides, these billionaires were all leading the charge, and his daughter wasn't so delicate. A little skill would always be beneficial, no question about training. Unaware that their father and teacher were about to give them a hard time, Barbara and her husband were kissing passionately in the morning sun. Thea ignored the couple's affectionate embrace and approached the 2 older men. "Uncle Bruce, can I use your wavelength transmitter today?" Thea had been struggling with this address for a long time. Calling them MR seemed distant, while calling them by their name seemed a bit distant, so she resorted to the playful, childish uncle. Sure enough, this address irked Batman. He was only in his early 30s, and he looked so old. He touched his cheek. His recent beard had grown thick, and he really looked older. But to a 17-year-old girl, he just had to call her uncle. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Of course, but the range is limited. It only works when the enemy is within 500 meters. Are you planning to attack today?" "Yes, sooner rather than later. While Mr. Freeze hasn't fully recovered yet, this is the perfect time to strike." Thea had discussed the current situation in Arkham with Bruce yesterday. The situation had reached a critical juncture, especially with the Court of Owl's involvement. Although Bruce preferred to wait until he was fully recovered before taking action, every second was precious right now. It wouldn't be surprising if these Gotham aristocrats, the Court of Owls, did something earth-shattering. Both of them were intelligent, and without a word or eye contact, Bruce tacitly accepted Thea's current command. If he were healthy and in Gotham, the command would undoubtedly be his. Even Superman wouldn't object. But now, Unable to enter or leave the front lines, he had no choice but to entrust Thea with full authority. Before 9 o'clock, the police officers, volunteers, and veterans who had received the call-up notice had arrived on the scene. Those who knew each other were surprised by the bright sunshine in Gotham that day. Yes, the sun, so common elsewhere, is a rarity in Gotham. Even a few sunny days in previous years wouldn't bring such blazing sunshine. Many lifelong Gotham residents woke up this morning to find their eyes awry. Convenience stores and specialty stores across the city were completely sold out of sunglasses. Sunglass manufacturers across the U.S., alerted by calls from distributors, worked overtime to meet the shortage. Meetings were held to determine what this phenomenon indicated, whether it was a North Korean missile crisis or a sudden shift in the Middle East. Batman had been busy this morning, analyzing the scarecrow gas sample Thea had brought back last time and creating a targeted injection that would provide 12-hour immunity. Last time, the poison was difficult to deliver due to the mixed crowd, but this time, if the sonic weapon worked, the outcome would be one-sided. Scarecrow's ruthlessness might just detonate in the crowd without a care in the world. But Bruce was a billionaire, and the entire operation involved hundreds of people. He didn't have the time to prepare hundreds of vials of injection, so he could only give one shot to everyone within the organization. Even Felicity, who wasn't on the front lines, received one. But he couldn't just ignore those righteous police officers and civilians. He put his brain to work and created a fortified antidote, a full 800 milliliters, which he gave to Robin. It would still provide protection for an hour after the battle began. Barbara, you and Robin will work together this time. You will deal with the claws of the Court of Owls, and I will support you. It was the same configuration as before, but without the Angel of Death and Mr. Freeze, they should have the advantage. But Thea, after Bruce's confirmation, knew that the claws weren't just one person, but a group of individuals. God knows how many there were. If they were all as skilled as last time, even 3 of them would be a huge challenge for Thea. Catwoman and Miss Bridget are the mobile unit for emergencies. Everything's okay? Let's go. Just before departure, Bruce called to Thea, whispering in Chinese, keep an eye on Selina for me. I'm worried about her and Talia. He lost his composure mid-sentence, unsure what to say now, feeling deeply distressed if either woman got hurt. Initially taken aback by the familiar yet unfamiliar Chinese, Thea realized it was Ms. Shiva who had mentioned her knowledge of Chinese. Batman spoke every major language in the world, not just Chinese but Cantonese. She was simply impressed. Chinese was indeed safe, but he was also concerned about the others in the room hearing it and sparking other people's concerns. In this world, Chinese is undoubtedly a foreign language. Despite his vague words, Thea understood. He hoped to help Talia in her time of need, but he was wary of Catwoman's suspicions. Chapter 105, Second Attack on Arkham, Part 2. It seems he still has feelings for Talia. Being a good man is not easy. Thea could only reply in Chinese, I understand. I'll take care of her. Neither of them discussed who this she was. For this Arkham siege, Thea reduced her standard arrows and brought a number of high-tech ones. Her previous battles against both the Angel of Death and Talia proved that her archery skills were only good against ordinary people. Lack of strength naturally led to lack of speed, and even the best aim was useless. If she still wanted to rely on conventional archery for success, she could only improve her strength. Thea felt that her archery skills were no different from those of the future Oliver. The key difference lay in the thickness of her arms. Strength was the foundation of all physical combat. Alice, archers weren't easy either. This time, she didn't intend to bring her skateboard, nor her cumbersome anti-gravity suit. She set out in a red smock, like a picnic, with her sword slung across her shoulder and infrared goggles. But once she reached the Arkham gates, she regretted bringing her skateboard. Because everyone discovered that the gate to Arkham, which had been blown apart the previous time, had been renovated, the entrance was now densely packed with people, all in silence. Leading the way were the Gotham celebrities they had met last time. Talia sat reclining on the 5-meter-high gate of the asylum. She was still wearing her dark green windbreaker, a hood, weapon slung around her waist, a quiver slung behind her, and a longbow in her hand. How dare they come out today? Aren't they afraid of being wiped out by missiles? Oh, Thea realized instantly. Talia had received news of Batman's return and knew her old lover wouldn't dare use missiles, so she had mobilized a large force to fight. Thea sincerely regretted bringing her skateboard to show off, but it was too late now. She bowed her head and ordered Leela, Quickly move the attack helicopters over. They'll cover our retreat if we're defeated." Indeed, Thea felt as if two groups had agreed to fight in the playground after school. The elementary school students on both sides were already in position, soldiers facing each other, generals facing each other. The intense visual impact kept assaulting her brain. The other side must have some kind of backing to come out so brazenly. She had to be careful. Seeing both sides arrive, Talia braced herself on the gate with her left hand, exerting her strength, and landed on the ground with a beautiful front flip. She slowly emerged from the formation, standing at the front, watching Thea's direction. Had she been orchestrating this all along? Possibly. She had the brains and the men. Seeing the chaotic group of penguins and pig-faced men quietly and obediently in the back, Thea confirmed her judgment. She was tempted to let Gordon continue posing as the dangerous leader, but Catwoman had already stormed out of the ranks. Catwoman was fully armed today, 3 daggers concealed beneath her tight black leather jacket, a long whip in hand, and a baton slung at her waist. Ever since she saw Talia, she finally had an outlet for all the frustration she'd been feeling lately. "You're the one who started all this, right? You know who I am. Let's have a showdown." Thea welcomed their duel. The two were equally skilled. Talia's martial arts were scientifically trained, resulting in a steady flow of power, while Catwoman's skills fluctuated. There was no telling if Catwoman might unleash a powerful counterattack in her rage. Thea was filled with admiration for Batman's foresight. His words were still fresh in her mind, and the two women were about to clash. Her mission wasn't difficult, just keep them alive. With a wry smile on her face, she drew an arrow and placed it on her bow, ready to support the defeated opponent. But things took a surprising turn. Talia pointed at Catwoman, who was stepping forward. "You and I have a personal feud." Then, pointing at Thea, who was watching from the queue, "Her and I have a business one." Catwoman couldn't quite put her finger on her current state of mind. She had seen Bruce pull Thea aside and give her instructions. Although she didn't understand Chinese, as her longtime lover, she understood his feelings. He had feelings for Talia, too. Where did she fit in? They had a relationship and a child, so she seemed a better fit than herself. Her standing up to the challenge alone wasn't without a desperate struggle, a sense of destiny, fortune and fortune. Regardless of who won or lost, this matter would be over. But when she mustered up the courage, she found Talia didn't accept the challenge, even using excuses about personal and business matters. This broke her mental defenses, and her fighting spirit vanished. "Since this is business, then you guys go for it." Thea felt like her glasses were about to fall off as she watched Catwoman's brisk steps return. "We agreed to a two-woman duel, and I'm still waiting for support." What was she saying? But before she could figure out what to do next, Talia's words made her feel like thunder rolling in the sky. "Sister, come out, this battle should be ours." Talia stared at Thea intently, took off her hood, revealing her long brown black hair. Who was she talking to? Thea looked left and right. Was Nissa Al Ghul nearby? But 2 seconds later, she found that everyone on the field was staring at her. "Are they talking about me? I'm your sister?" "Your sister? How could I be your sister?" Thea's mind was open, wondering if she was also the daughter of a ninja master. It was impossible for her own mother to make friends in Nandarbet. Although according to the results of social network research, her own mother could contact the ninja master without more than 6 people, they were too far away. Dispelling her wild thoughts, Thea knew she'd misunderstood. She took a look at her own attire. She was about the same age as her sister, with the same brown-black hair. Nissa favored red and black outerwear, and her own combat uniform was also red. More importantly, she knew the martial arts of the League of Assassins. The ninja master and his son-in-law, Batman, had much in common, a disregard for women. His daughter was probably the only woman in the League. The future Sarah Lance had infiltrated with Nissa's help. Thinking of Nissa, Thea casually retorted, "I'm not Nissa," but she regretted it the moment she said it. How could an outsider possibly know that name? Sure enough, Talia smiled faintly. "Father didn't come out with you, is this your trial? Sending you to capture a traitor like me? Your father is still as ruthless as ever." Shia collapsed even more when she heard this. "Yes, you are so smart." I was speechless. Nisha is indeed going to the trial now, and the timeline coincidentally matches. But why did she come to Gotham? She is going to Purgatory Island, sister. Chapter 106, Second Attack on Arkham, Part 3. In fact, the revelation of the so-called truth not only devastated her, but also reverberated throughout the heroic faction. Bruce, known as the most intelligent man in the world, was remotely monitoring the battle. He was already nervously anticipating a brawl between his two women, but he hadn't expected such a horrific turn. "Thea, are you serious?" Bruce, despite having spent considerable time in southern Darbit, had never met Nyssa in person. He merely knew of her existence. However, he was well versed in the League's rules and could readily guess at Talia's suspicions. Furthermore, his incredibly intelligent mind had spotted a clue in their names. Thea and Talia were very similar. In less than 5 seconds, he had drawn upon numerous avenues of evidence, including onomastics, lineage, and bloodline, concluding that there was a 90% chance they were related. So, it's not good to overread and overthink things. Of course, Thea couldn't admit it. It wasn't related in the first place. The Ninja Master was a renowned villainous boss, so how could she possibly be related to him? "We're fine, trust me." Her tone didn't dispel Batman's doubts. Bruce wasn't sure how to react to this promising young man suddenly becoming his sister-in-law. It was a small world. In fact, if Thea had taken off her hood, a single glance at her features would have proven Talia wrong. The Ninja Master had Arab features, after all, while Thea's ancestors were all Caucasian. Anyone with face blindness would have noticed the difference. But revealing her features went against her principle of keeping a low profile. With her strength, she couldn't afford to be targeted by Gotham's perverts. Since she'd misunderstood, let's just keep misunderstanding her. Ignoring the strange looks around her, Thea slowly walked out of the crowd. Talia, assuming she was ready to challenge her, also shuffled forward. When they were 10 steps apart, they both stopped. "Let's fight according to the League's rules. If I lose, I take my men with me, and you lose too," Talia tentatively suggested. With a wave of her hand, several black-clad men in leather jackets and carrying bows and arrows appeared. It wasn't clear if these were the elite troops she'd taken with her when she defected from the Alliance, or if they were more recently trained. Thea looked around and saw perhaps 100 of them. If every one of them possessed Yao-Fei's strength, it could truly tip the balance of power on the battlefield. "That's a good idea," Thea agreed to her request. Batman, observing the battlefield from a distance, wished his woman would leave immediately and never again cause trouble. "Okay," Thea said, as they both removed their bows and arrows, gently placing them on the ground. They fixed their gazes on their opponents, drew their weapons, and each performed a mysterious gesture with their weapons. According to the rules of the Alliance, this was a salute to the ancient gods. So, despite his current corrupted ways, the Ninja Master was still a deeply traditional and rule-abiding person. All his disciples learned this set of etiquette. Malcolm, who had served as his lieutenant for a while, was naturally familiar with the moves. For some unknown reason, Malcolm had taught Thea the whole process. This led to a certain misunderstanding. The League of Assassins has a strict hierarchy, and the challenges for each rank have subtle differences. It just so happened that Old Ma was originally a lieutenant, and he taught the same kind of moves. Talia, long serving as the Grandmaster's deputy, had also been a lieutenant before defecting, making Old Ma her successor. This resulted in the two women performing identical moves, and the onlookers could only observe their graceful movements, their demeanor imbued with a sense of ancient simplicity. But watching Thea's deft movements, Batman, one of only 3 people in the arena who knew the moves, couldn't resist. He asked through his headset, "Thea, are you from the League?" He wanted to say, "I'm not from the League, I'm from the Horde," but Thea was so focused on watching Talia's steps that she couldn't explain. She muttered, "No," but her words still left a flaw. Talia swung her wolf-fang longsword and slashed at her neck. Unaware of such a simple blow, Thea raised her sword with both hands, blocking her longsword and delivering a flying kick to her stomach. As the instructor who trained Yao-Fei and would soon train Green Arrow, Talia was incredibly experienced in combat. She dodged the kick sideways, switching from a chop to a slash, aiming for Thea's fingers along the blade of her sword. With a flick of her wrist, Thea used the Spanish fencing technique of stabbing, striking Talia squarely in the middle. "You're good at close combat, better than your archery." Talia immediately shifted her tactics, holding her long sword across her chest to block the blow. "My archery is the worst, you underestimate me." Thea launched a series of stabbing, slashing, and slashing strikes, attempting to seize the initiative. Not bad, really good. Talia had indeed somewhat underestimated Thea. She had only ever felt she had the upper hands in their previous archery contest, and now, Facing her much younger sister, she had been somewhat underestimating her from the start. However, as the eldest daughter and on the opposing side, she couldn't afford to lose, so she, too, used swift attacks to gain an early advantage. Batman, far away, realized his sudden interruption had disrupted Thea's pace and regretted it deeply. Seeing her gradually even the advantage, he felt better. He also hated to see casualties in the current clash between the two women, and he resented his own inability to do so. He could have asked Thea to watch over Catwoman, but instead of a fight, the main character wasn't there, while the helpers were. This left him speechless. He considered donning his batsuit and going to the scene to help, but seeing that he was still on crutches, he decided not to risk his life. It would be embarrassing if he was knocked to the ground by a small soldier in a melee. He tried to give them some remote guidance, but found that both of them moved very quickly, almost like fellow disciples. They knew their moves by heart, so verbal instructions were unnecessary and too late. He was terrified. Who could he turn to for safety? His two apprentices were watching intently. Both women were far superior to him. He was still at a lower level, so he couldn't rely on them. Alice, the closest person in the arena, was his old lover, Catwoman. Selina, please pay attention to their fight. If there's any danger, stop it. Bruce knew that Catwoman would definitely understand his intentions as soon as he said this. He was really helpless to let one lover protect another lover. As expected, Catwoman understood what he meant in seconds. She was jealous and snorted heavily to show that she heard it. After that, there was no more words. The fight between the two women in the field had reached a white-hot level. Thea was cut on the left shoulder by Talia, and Talia was punched in the face by her. Blood was flowing down the corner of her mouth. The two entered the stalemate stage again, staggering 3 steps away from each other, taking the opportunity to recover their strength, while constantly moving around the center of the field, and trying to find each other's flaws. Chapter 107, Second Fight at Arkham, Part 4. This clash between the two was different from their previous archery match, which was merely a brief encounter. Back then, Talia was wary of being ambushed by the ninja master, while Thea didn't want to fight her, so both fought with restraint. This time, however, Talia felt her sister was valued by their father, and the thought of her own unfair treatment filled her with rage. Forgetting Catwoman, even her own son and husband, Batman, she was completely focused on proving herself no less capable than her sister. Initially, Thea was forced into a fight, having been strangely dragged into the role of Catwoman's victim. She felt this was Gotham's greatest injustice, and she was also concerned about Batman's woman, Green Arrow's future mentor. All these factors limited her ability to fight. But after a few close calls, she cast aside her concerns. Who's afraid of whom? Catwoman and Batman were perfectly fine together, and Green Arrow could at least teach her. It wasn't a big deal. In a word, it was a head-on confrontation. Less than half a minute's rest before the two resumed their sword-fighting exchanges. Both the police and the criminals were puzzled. They'd agreed this was a civil war in Gotham, right? What was the point of you two outsiders coming here to fight to the death? They watched the ferocious fight, afraid to speak, only to watch in silence. Talia had previously advertised her story, and everyone on both sides knew she'd traveled 1,000 miles in search of her husband, child in hand. Now, watching her fierce clash with Thea, it was hard not to suspect something. I heard she's here to fight for her husband, one of Penguin's men recounted to those around him. I heard the one fighting her was her sister, a self-proclaimed well-informed member of the Court of Owls said, giving a gesture of command. Why are these two sisters fighting so fiercely? Asked a member of the 12th Operations Squad of the Gotham Police Department's 5th Precinct. Don't you understand? It's clearly a fight between two sisters. We can't go into too much detail about this, a self-proclaimed veteran recounted to those around him some unspoken story. With nothing better to do, both sides of the story passed the time on gossip. The story became increasingly bizarre, embellished by numerous artistic manipulations, making it seem plausible at first glance. As for Catwoman, one of the original story's protagonists, her fame and achievements had long been hidden by the public. So, when the final version of the story, after many twists and turns, finally reached Catwoman through her friend Miss Firefly, she was completely bewildered. The story had morphed into a rather melodramatic one. Talia's sister had admired Batman since childhood, then, as an adult, saw true love. Upon learning of this, her sister categorically opposed it, sparking the Gotham War. This story, leaked by one of Talia's longtime followers, was incredibly plausible, but it was distorted by the public to create this narrative. As for Catwoman? Apologies, Talia didn't care about her at all, and her followers were completely unaware of her existence, so she has no role in this story. Catwoman, having been so flatteringly ignored, didn't know what to say. Her eyelids drooped, sensing the gazes of those around her, and she could only think, like an ostrich, just ignore me, I'll steal everything from your house, unaware that she hadn't just taken the blame. She was now the one taking the blame. Thea and Talia's duel had entered its final stages. Talia's advantage lay in her experience, both were trained by their fathers. But when old Ma competed against the ninja master, the difference in skill was stark. Even though Thea had trained diligently with Lady Shiva in her later years, her experience was still inferior to Talia's. Thea had the advantage in physical strength. She was only 16, while Talia was already in her 30s, more than a generation older. Furthermore, she'd given birth, leaving her health past its prime. Don't believe the experts who say childbirth doesn't harm your health, that's nonsense. I've never heard of a female warrior becoming more skilled after having children. Thea ducked her head to avoid the incoming blow, using the momentum from the turn to swivel in the opposite direction, crossing her sword with her left hand and slashing at Talia's waist. Talia's previous moves were somewhat outdated, and she couldn't retract them quickly. She bent her knees, doubled her upper body, and dodged the swift sword. Thea, taking advantage of the situation, didn't wait for her to rise. Her right hand followed her left, and with both hands, she shifted her horizontal slash into a downward slash, slashing down at Talia on the ground. Talia had no time to rise, so she rolled halfway sideways, her legs clamping around Thea's, trying to bring her down with her. Thea, perceiving her intentions, knew she couldn't fall prey to her rhythm. She thrust her feet forward, her left foot forward, her right foot sideways, forming a T stance. This wasn't the technique of a ninja master. It was Kalaripayat, an ancient Indian martial art incorporating ritual and dance movements, taught by Ms. Siva, who called herself Han Chinese but was part Indian. Thea's practice of this martial art was only so-so, believing that unwavering force was king. She had never been a fan of this fighting style that seemed more dance than martial arts, but today, it suddenly worked. The ninja master might have known this martial art, but Talia truly didn't. She pushed with her feet, only to find her opponent motionless. She knew she was in trouble. Sure enough, Thea, seeing this golden opportunity, swung her right hand halfway around and slashed diagonally at Talia's neck. Still on the ground, unable to dodge, the thought of being defeated by a sister half her age filled her with unbearable sorrow. Was all her hard work truly meaningless? Was her talent truly so lacking? Driven by a reflexive unwillingness to admit defeat, she too stabbed Thea's heart with her knife, from bottom to top. Selena, hurry, Batman, anxious, practically leaped out of the monitor. The two exchanged blows so quickly that by the time they reacted, it was too late. Catwoman pulled out her pre-prepared throwing knives and prepared to intervene. Of course, Thea wouldn't die with her, having already prepared for a counterattack. Seeing the blade coming towards her, she pulled out a dagger she hadn't used in the entire fight, and with a clang, parried her long blade. He placed his sword at Talia's neck and said calmly, "You lose, Thea, don't." At this moment, the only person who could whisper in her ear was Batman. Commissioner Gordon wanted to speak but held back. "For your trial, kill me." Talia calmly threw the knife aside, not rising, and sat on the ground, ready to die. Trial? Damn it. Thea had already won. And the urge to complain surged. Would killing you get me any gear? Would I even get an achievement? Besides, Batman wouldn't let him do it. But it wouldn't be good to just give up so suddenly. This was a sacred duty for the League of Assassins. Didn't you see Talia's 100+ minions watching in silence, none of them showing any interest in rushing to their boss's rescue? Batman, knowing the rules, was torn. A hasty interjection would be tantamount to insulting both of them, so he could only silently watch the outcome. Xiao was stunned for 5 seconds. Damn it, why didn't anyone give her a way out? Just when she was thinking about how to end it, someone who didn't know the rules and thought he was the boss jumped out, and 3 sharp blades like grinding wheels flew towards her. Chapter 108, Second Attack on Arkham, v. Thea wanted to pounce and applaud this ignorant and fearless creature. A ninja master's most important virtue was rules, or perhaps, after 800 years of life, His personality had long since eroded, leaving him with only this spiritual sustenance. Facing the rapidly spinning blades, Thea was truly fearless. She dodged one, cleaved another with her longsword, and the last was cut off by a backhanded strike from Talia, who had risen from the ground. Watching the enraged Talia, Thea found the Assassin's League's rules quite amusing. She didn't blame herself for wanting to kill her, but instead resented someone who had helped her. It was truly powerful, truly good. The duel was interrupted, and naturally, it couldn't continue. Thea simply put on a show. "Who interrupted us?" she shouted fiercely. Talia, knife in hand, also surveyed her own team, trying to identify the one who had disrupted their sacred ritual. They certainly didn't see who intervened, but Talia's 100+ minions had a few with sharp eyesight, communicating with each other in secret codes. Instantly, over 100 bows and arrows were pointed at the short, odd-looking penguin. Speaking of which, it was unknown how the Ninja Master's syllabus was compiled. It was called the Assassin's League, but aside from Batman, who transferred in early, the rest of the trainees were all archers: Black Arrow, Green Arrow, and Red Arrow. It was truly speechless. The penguin, being targeted by so many archers, was a bit dumbfounded. He had spent his entire life figuring out how to stab his companions more efficiently, and today, for once, he did something good. Seeing Talia was about to die, he used his umbrella to shoot 3 flying knives. He had guessed the beginning, but not the end. Being pointed at by over 100 arrows must have been unpleasant. The pig-faced man beside him unconsciously took a few steps to the side. "You have disrupted the sacred duel of the Assassin's League. According to ancient law, I must kill you. Come out and fight me. Win and live, lose and die." Thea spoke these words with a powerful voice, repeating them twice in English and ancient Arabic. She raised her longsword and pointed it at the penguin from afar. Win and live, lose and die. Talia's minions surrounded him as if it were a festival. Some of them even drew their swords and pointed them at the sky, putting psychological pressure on the penguin. Talia had no complaints about her minions supporting the enemy from a minute ago. The belief in following the rules was ingrained in her. She had no remorse for being the one being rescued. She also drew her sword and pointed it at the penguin. "Come out. You must die." Gordon's men were confused by this. Judging by the way Thea was acting, she was going to cause the enemy to fight among themselves. What a talent. Batman understood these rules. Seeing his group idle, he recounted the life story of the Ninja Master like a storyteller, then discussed the various rules within the league, both good and bad. The audience was a little stunned. Someone could actually live to be 800 years old. Thea didn't realize her once clear past had become hazy, now shrouded in the league's mystique by Batman. Is there some misunderstanding here? The penguin watched as the crowd around him gradually emptied out. How could he dare challenge Thea? The two women had been battling for half an hour, the flashing of swords and sabers terrifying. He had risen to power through scheming, not fighting, and with a limp and a disability, how could he possibly win? The league's will is unquestionable. You insult the sacredness of duel, and you insult the Ninja Master. Thea felt her acting skills had definitely improved. What was she and the Ninja Master even remotely related to? She's just using the tiger's skin to raise a banner. Sure enough, when she mentioned the Ninja Master, Talia's minions roared in support. At this point, the penguin wished he could faint, or at least be shot. As the former king of Gotham's underground, he'd never met the Master, but he knew him. He just thought he was a legendary figure. Did I insult him? No, I really wanted to help. Okay, you won't come out, right? Then I'll just do it. Thea knew when to quit while she was ahead. A few moments of shilling might be fine, but holding it up too long would be bad news, especially if the tiger came. Her relationship with Mr. Freeze was shady, and Talia was a defector, so it was hard to say who the Master's first target would be. She drew a freezing arrow and aimed it at the penguin. This time, she could use the League's ancient tradition to kill him. Batman knew the rules, so it didn't matter if he saw it. After all, it was all the Master's fault. She wondered if this guy, nicknamed the Penguin, was just as cold resistant. If Mr. Freeze could be exempted, could you be too? Thea was ready to show them the power of science. With a whoosh, an arrow shot out, and the penguin was pointed at by over 100 arrows. He was a man of considerable character, a man of considerable determination. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but feared a barrage of arrows. So, facing Thea's arrow, he hesitated for a moment before deciding to take it head-on, hoping to survive. Wanting to leave a reputation for kindness on the side of justice, Thea aimed for the penguin's limp leg instead of a vital part. Puff! The moment the arrow pierced his leg, the penguin felt the temperature plummet. He knew he'd been tricked. It was supposed to be a normal arrow, wasn't it? These were the last words that came to his mind, but his lips couldn't form them. HMPH, what penguin? Thea pouted. That's a fake. It's all so sinister and powerful. In less than 2 seconds, his leg was covered in frost. The freezing speed was so rapid. He could impersonate the king of Wumio in less than 10 seconds. Just as Thea was thinking about how, with the penguin dead and his men scattering, she could stabilize Talia while Gordon and the others took care of the rest. No matter how many augmented men there were, they weren't afraid. This time, they could say they had completely won. Then a roar shattered her thoughts. A tall, burly figure leaped from a nearby building, covering the 100-meter distance in less than 5 seconds. He extended his sturdy arms, ignoring the gradually solidifying ice, and grabbed the penguin by the collar, pulling him up from the increasingly solid ground like a carrot. With his left hand, he plucked the arrow from the penguin's leg, glanced at his pale face, grabbed his lame leg, and slammed him back and forth on the ground like a dead dog, shaking off the ice. He lifted him up, examined his results, and with a sinister smile, handed him to the penguin's little companion beside him. Bane, Batman on the monitor said bitterly, looking at the familiar figure. Thea also saw the guy suddenly rush out. She had expected this. After all, if Talia was already here, how could Bane be far behind? But this guy had ruined her plan, which was a bit annoying. Today, Bane was also fully armed, a strong body of 2 meters, bare-chested, with his signature green canister slung behind his back. Liquid was constantly flowing through the tube into his masked mouth. He said in a muffled voice, "Talia, this is not what we agreed on. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 109, Second Fight at Arkham, VI. Talia sneered, "I don't need to explain anything I do." Bane, with his massive head, looked at her unflinchingly. Now is not the time. Their gazes locked in a fierce exchange, until Talia waved her hand, and over 100 men in black lowered their bows and arrows. "I'm not participating in today's battle. Take your time." With that, Talia blew Thea a kiss and walked away with her men. "Do you want to bear the wrath of the Alliance?" Thea glared fiercely at Bane. It must be said she was quite immersed in the role, emulating the Ninja Master's vindictiveness almost perfectly. Honestly, Bane didn't dare to provoke the Master. Even many wicked villains kept a respectful distance from the Master, a man without any special abilities, no magical modifications, and no technological equipment. You couldn't imagine how many backups he'd prepared over the past 800 years. As a junior, Bane didn't dare confront him head-on. But he couldn't back down in front of so many people. Talia, who could have been a distraction, had fled first, but she'd fought for quite some time, so it was barely acceptable. It would be humiliating for him to just run away without a fight. He'd taken so much money from the Court of Owls, so he had to deal with it. "I have no intention of antagonizing the Master, and I respect the rules of the League, but this guy can't die today." Bane's words were almost servile. He'd never been so cowardly in his fame, and he secretly resented the penguin. "Why did you interfere when you had nothing to do? You're just adding to the chaos." If Thea had been more like her, she would have stepped aside. She didn't want to fight Bane. With his big head and thick neck, he looked like a warrior-like boss with immense strength. It would be a tough fight for someone as agile as her. While the Ninja Master's masculinity could intimidate Bane, it was also a double-edged sword, limiting him. If he had replied, "Okay, that's it, let's go our separate ways," it would have been completely out of character, and anyone would have seen the problem. "This role-playing game must continue," Thea said sinisterly. "Then you try it." With that, she drew her arrow as quickly as she could, aiming without using her eyes, using her powerful senses to unleash an arrow at the unconscious penguin. Bane had been watching closely for her to strike, but he had never seen Thea shoot, having only heard Talia say he was inferior to her. Facing Thea's current top-tier arrow, he underestimated it, and even trying to run past her was too late. The penguin had the most followers present, and the Court of Owls had offered him a large sum of money to keep him alive today. Bane could only give it his all. The green canister behind him seethed violently, and streams of venom flowed through the pipes into Bane's body. His arm visibly thickened. He grabbed a nearby gang member and hurled it at Thea's arrow. While Thea's arrows could still vaguely be seen, the human sandbag he threw later had already exceeded the limits of his retina's signal reception. The unfortunate man, who arrived after her but was first to meet Thea's sharp arrow, was obliterated without a single grunt. Such a powerful move. The crowd might have simply felt impressive, without a concrete understanding, but Thea, who was nearing the limits of human physical fitness, was well aware of the vast difference. Her own arrows traveled at roughly 300 feet per second, or 90 meters. If the arrows maintained a constant speed, that would be 300 kilometers per hour. But Bane's hasty throw was conservatively estimated to have reached over 500 kilometers per hour. If the weight of both and air resistance were factored in, the figure would be even higher. Truly a miracle of strength. The ancients were right. This man could only outsmart, not outmaneuver. Thea was momentarily stunned by this man's astonishing feat. Bane's hasty use of venom to strengthen himself wasn't without its pain. With a bit of venom surging through his brain, he cast aside any reservations about the Alliance and glared fiercely at Thea. Sure enough, the Alliance style. A scoundrel who only attacks in a group. Do you dare challenge me in a one-on-one fight? How could Thea, with over 500 minions, possibly stand up to him in a one-on-one duel, especially when this guy was so much more formidable? Spare him this time, and bring the skateboard next time to crush him. Layla, are your snipers ready? 2 shots first, let's see how defensive this guy is. Thea's 2 shots was just an adjective. The Sky Eye agents understood perfectly. Snipers from 3 directions each fired 5 rounds in a continuous barrage. Bang, bang, bang. Bane, despite his experience, perhaps also due to his lack of agility, didn't even bother dodging. He shielded his face and heart with both hands and took all 15 rounds. A range of 1,200 meters, powerful enough to penetrate 4 millimeters thick steel, was completely thwarted by Bane's formidable physique. The bullets lodged in his muscle, and a few poorly angled shots barely scraped his skin. As his immense healing abilities took hold, bullets were constantly forced out of his muscles and onto the ground. Even Thea, confident as she was, never thought her bow and arrows could outperform a sniper rifle. Using a sword to lash out was simply not part of her plan. This guy was destined to be dealt with by the master, so she'd better just play second fiddle. But even if she wanted to retreat, she had to ask Bane's permission. He was tempted to scold Thea for breaking the rules of martial arts. What about the cold weapons duel? Squeezing out bullets seemed like a breeze, all awe-inspiring and impressive, but how could it not hurt? While the venom accelerated healing, it wasn't without cost. It was constantly eroding his brain, and each use required a long recovery period before he could regain consciousness. He didn't bother talking anymore. Determined to end the fight quickly, he charged at Thea like a bull. You've got your sights set on me, haven't you? Thea's temper flared. I just don't want to fight you, not because I'm afraid of you. He drew out 2 entwined arrows and placed them on his bow. Let this rough fellow witness the advanced martial arts of the East. Let him know what it means to overcome hardness with softness. With calculated lead time, the 2 arrows flew out, piercing the ground just 1 step in front of Bane's feet. A white substance, called spider silk but actually a chemical product, instantly filled Bane's vision. What the hell was this? He instinctively tried to push it away, but the moment his hand touched the silk, he felt it stuck. He unleashed 2 tons of force, trying to rip it apart. But Thea had anticipated his move. With his powerful pull, the remaining silk tugged away with a whoosh, coating his head and face. As he struggled to break free, the area of skin stuck together grew larger. Remember, he had jumped out shirtless. In less than 10 seconds, he was no longer human. From a distance, he looked like a large white cocoon. Stop daydreaming. Organize an attack. Xiao thought her friends were probably just watching the show and had forgotten what they were doing, so she kindly reminded them. Chapter 110, Second Fight at Arkham, Part 7. Thea finished her words, not waiting for their reaction. She raised her sword in her right hand, making a flower-shaped gesture, the blade pointed diagonally toward the sky. For the glory of the Alliance, she thought. No, the words quickly became for the freedom of Gotham. When the first shots rang out on the battlefield, she had already found cover and was retreating to rest. There was no other way. After half an hour of fighting, Talia was a formidable opponent. Besides being physically exhausted, she was also seriously injured. She examined the wounds, finding them superficial. Her current outfit only looked good, its actual protection was practically zero. Next time, she'd have to get a set of high-density Kevlar from Batman. Ignoring the battle ahead, she leaped through the crowd and headed to the back to rehydrate and bandage her wounds. What? Sisters fighting over a husband? She'd barely taken 2 sips of her water when Felicity whispered something that shook her to her core. What kind of logic was this? They agreed not to spread rumors. Over 500 people at the scene were enough to warrant a prison sentence. When she learned the final version of the story had spread to everyone on the battlefield, she didn't know what to say. You Gothamites are just too idle, too busy, so your imaginations are so wild. She squinted her eyes and surveyed the battlefield. Her first thought was to silence them. Did she have any weapon that could kill them all? The elation she'd felt after capturing Bane with some difficulty faded. She was both taking the blame and taking the fall. Batman and Catwoman, you two involved, didn't even bother to explain? Frustrated, she didn't even bother to fight. From a distance, she watched Catwoman take on the pig-faced man, while Barbara and Robin combined their swords to take on the two claws. Catwoman couldn't tell whether she was upset or relieved. The heroine had been sidelined by some strange twist of fate, leaving her with no role to play. She felt anguish, her club constantly targeting the pig-faced man's head. His already large head looked even bigger. Was she planning to beat him into a fool? Barbara and her husband worked well together. Both Talons were top-tier assassins trained by the Court of Owls from childhood, and their skills were formidable. The outcome of the 2-on-2 battle was uncertain. Thea, I know you need to recover, but Bane, you won't be trapped for long. Bruce, monitoring him remotely, remained deeply concerned about the enemy who had broken his back. Oh, Thea said, her eyes drooping as she glanced at the large cocoon in the distance. Bruce was indeed correct. Bane wasn't actually trapped initially, he'd simply absorbed too much of the chemical in the spider silk and passed out. Now, with his incredible resistance to poison, he was gradually regaining consciousness and struggling. He counted his arrows. He originally had 5 freezing arrows. Killer Croc had used 2, and the Penguin had wasted 1 earlier. It looked like he'd have to use another today. The distance was too far, so he had to resort to projectiles. Fortunately, the freezing arrow's power wasn't in the arrow itself. It didn't matter if they hit or not, as long as they were within range. He pointed his bow at the sky and fired another freezing arrow in Bane's direction. This time, without the big-headed, thick-necked bruiser to disrupt the situation, the quick freeze effect was effective. In just 10 seconds, Bane, who had nearly broken free, was frozen solid again. You have the ability to freeze, too. Miss Firefly, who had also stayed out of the fight, looked at Thea with a strange tone. What do you mean by that eagerness to try it? You're so opposed to freezing. Then what will you say when you see the Ice Squad, Captain Cold and Killer Frost? Of course, Thea couldn't tell Miss Firefly that her condition was too severe and that medication couldn't suppress it anymore. She'd need physical therapy next time. She said sheepishly, it's either my ability or the power of my arrows, and there's only one left. That's a good move. Is it liquid nitrogen or liquid ammonia? Batman, from a distance, saw her arrows for the first time. The web wrap arrows had already been impressive, but this one was even more effective. Knowing she couldn't hide it, and that anyone could see through it, Thea chatted casually with Bruce. Neither of them discussed core technology, just theoretically. I say, stop talking and help us first. Barbara Robin was already exhausted from facing the 2 well-trained claws, and the more she listened to their random chatter, the more she grew annoyed. Okay, I'm coming. Thea's affability wasn't just to curry favor with Barbara. After all, she'd originally come to Gotham to rob the rich. And who in Gotham was richer than the Court of Owls now? Dozens of families, over 200 years of accumulated wealth. But this couldn't be done publicly, it required some covert tactics. She pulled out a specially crafted arrowhead, embedded with a nanoscale tracking device. One of Old Ma's men had stolen it from Ray Palmer's company, and Old Ma had given it to Thea because he thought it was useless. Even Felicity didn't know how the arrow was made. The Court of Owls was wealthy, but they hid it well. To find this wealthy group, Thea decided to use the tracking device on the 2 claws. Aiming at one of the less agile claws, Robin's short club lashed down, forcing him to duck and dodge, looking for a chance to strike back. Thea, darting through the crowd, spotted this opening and, without a word, drew her bow and shot. Her archery wasn't as good against Bane and Talia, due to their superior strength and agility, but it was perfectly adequate against those above average, barely above average. The arrow pierced his stomach perfectly. "Ouch!" cried the wounded claw. Though brainwashed and devoid of any sense of right and wrong, he still felt pain. He knew he had been ambushed, and with a swift movement of his longsword, he forced Robin back. Gritting his teeth, he pulled the arrow from his stomach and scanned for his attacker. Meanwhile, Thea retreated back into the crowd, flipped on her glasses, and confirmed the nano-tracker had entered his body and attached itself to his internal organs. With a satisfied nod, she deactivated the tracker. Now was not the time. "Thea, our informants report that several major crime families in the city are rapidly gathering forces and rushing towards us," the usually taciturn Leela reported the bad news. "How far is it?" "Less than 2 blocks. Was this a premeditated plan, or did the Court of Owls act on impulse when they saw the situation was getting worse?" Thea felt it was the latter. Talia's departure dealt a heavy blow to the balance of power between the two sides, something they probably hadn't anticipated. If they were attacked from both sides, their side would surely be badly defeated. Thea observed the balance of power in the arena. "Selena, get back here." Catwoman heard the order and quickly chased away the pig-faced man with a swollen head. "What's the matter?" Thea handed her a sharp arrow. "You've seen my magnetic arrow. I need you to insert it behind the enemy, preferably to cover the enemy within a radius of 50 meters. Chapter 111, Second Fight at Arkham, VIE. "Captain, tell your men to prepare and wait for the signal. Once the enemy's weapons are depleted, we'll advance and eliminate them first." The area was too vast for Thea to fire far, so she had to enlist the services of Catwoman, a master of Parker, to carry out the work behind enemy lines. "Thea, thermal imaging shows the augmented are almost out." Felicity, who had been watching the monitor, also delivered some bad news. "Robin, prepare the wavelength transmitter." Thea fired a barrage of arrows, forcing Claw back and shielding them and Barbara as they returned to the main force. Whether retreating or counterattacking, rallying the troops was always a good idea. Catwoman, with her human-level agility, climbed high and low, weaving through crowds and buildings. Her sense of direction was excellent, and she twisted and turned to reach the rear of the bandits. Using a dart-like technique, she lofted her arrow into the ground directly behind the battlefield. "All right," Catwoman said to Thea from behind. "Find a thick wall to hide." Thea estimated the time and flipped the switch on the bow. A low humming sound echoed, followed by a series of whooshing and whirring noises, sending many Arkham gang members stumbling from the piercing noise, unaware their weapons had vanished. "Attack!" Commissioner Gordon, eager to blow the charge and raise the American flag, charged forward, pistol in hand. Seeing the commissioner's desperate devotion, and the lack of weapons on the opposing team, his men, undeterred, charged with a frenzy. The casualties instantly escalated. The unarmed gang members faced the armed officers like Indians facing the colonists. Despite their resentment, they fell to the ground unwillingly. Commissioner Gordon, though remorseful, knew reinforcements were approaching. A veteran of the battlefield, he knew priorities, and didn't even mention Miranda clauses. His men, too, were so enraged by the danger, they had forgotten they were police officers, not soldiers. This day would later be known in history as the Gotham Massacre. Countless humanitarians sat in their air-conditioned rooms, expressing their displeasure at the massacre perpetrated by the Gotham Police Department. But that's a story for another time. Unaware they were already immersed in a historical event, the officers remained restrained, while the passionate citizens and veterans rejoiced. Their inner violence could no longer be contained, and they unleashed a barrage of submachine gun fire upon the unarmed criminals. In less than a minute, the dark earth of Arkham Square was stained red with the blood of sin. Scarecrow's elite troops and Penguin's loyal minions fell in droves. Batman, to be honest, felt pain watching this scene, but he knew he couldn't stop it. This was war, either the good guys would die or the bad guys would perish. It was impossible to knock out, torture, and take away everyone in such a large-scale scene. Thea and Gordon's decision was not wrong. Thea felt no guilt. These were all bad guys. Would locking them up stop them from doing evil? Noticing the veterans were losing control, she approached Leela and whispered, "The enhanceds are coming from the west. You lead them there and hold off the first wave." They both knew exactly who those were. The mastermind, panicking, watched his own side being slaughtered at an unprecedented rate. He controlled the enhanceds, not even going through the gates, but simply using explosives to clear a path. Nearly 200 enhanceds rushed out in a single volley. The veterans, rabid with rage, faced a formidable enemy head-on. Several of Leela's disguised agents had strategically lured them to the side, exposing them to the strongest attack since the start of the war. Thea didn't order the sonic weapons to fire directly, but instead watched from a distance, trying to mitigate any uncontrollable factors while ensuring the enhanceds were within range. As the veterans continued to suffer casualties, until no more enhanceds escaped from the asylum, she nodded to Robin. This sonic wave was different from Thea's previous magnetic arrows. Hers had been purely accidental collateral damage, but Master Bat's was a serious infrasound wave. Before anyone on the scene noticed anything unusual, over 200 augmented beings were already stumbling. Good results? Thea signaled to Commissioner Gordon. Let's continue. Can these people still be saved? The old commissioner was still trying to salvage something. Thea shook her head. Genetic transformation is irreversible. They are no longer the same citizens, Commissioner. In later years, the old commissioner, known as Executioner Gordon, had given up. What difference did it make whether he killed 300 or 500? With a wave of his hand, everyone focused their fire on these newly emerged targets. The biochemical experiments were clearly working. These individuals were much stronger than the already lifeless criminals on the ground. Many, even after being shot 4 or 5 times, were still struggling to run. But as more and more people fell, the few remaining tougher ones had to face the barrage of fire from 5 or 6 guns at once. The heavy bleeding, coupled with the constant infrasound waves emitted by their sonic weapons, exacerbated the casualties among the enhanced humans. Bang! A deafening roar drew Thea's gaze to the east. Bane, who had been frozen by her, had somehow created countless cracks in the ice, his powerful arm already halfway extended. The loud bang was the result of his powerful blow. This was the first time Thea had seen someone throw themselves. While the method was a bit violent, this guy's strength truly exceeded scientific calculations. It was too exaggerated. Was there any other way? Thea, get out of the way, he's lost his mind, Batman warned them, knowing this enemy well. Yes, shattering the ice from the inside, what a tremendous force that would take. Bane's eyes flashed red as he shattered the ice with 3 punches and 2 kicks. His upper body muscles swelled like a mountain. The venom behind him, once overflowing, had dwindled to 1/5, and plenty was still flowing from the canister to his lips. This guy had been driven berserk by himself. Thea felt this was the only reasonable explanation. Whoever went up now would die. The helicopters, originally prepared to take on the major crime families, had to be deployed early. Turning to Leela, he instructed, use your helicopter cannons to lure him away. Once he's away from the crowd, use the missiles. He raised his hand and made a downward motion. What about Batman's fateful battle? She hadn't given it much thought. And judging by this man's furious demeanor, Bruce should just forget about it. You're definitely no match for him. I'll take care of it for you. The helicopters moved swiftly. Speeding over from their previous hiding spot and unleashing a barrage of bullets on the ground, the giant figure emitting green mist. At this point, Bane could be considered a super Bane. After the venom had stimulated his brain, his entire body had fully unleashed its full potential, and he had achieved a certain degree of immunity to the hail of bullets. He casually grabbed whatever was nearby and threw it into the air. Seeing that he had successfully pulled the monster, Woozy Hi began firing a few shots and flew a distance, constantly trying to pull Bane away. Chapter 112, Great Victory. The best approach would be to pit Bane against a major crime families, letting them fight each other. But no one is stupid. These well-connected families possess surface-to-air missiles, and pilots wouldn't dare approach them. It's truly ironic that the American military, swayed by the liberal democracy promoted by their politicians, has become overly lax. They're willing to fight when the wind's in their favor, but instantly rebel at the slightest sign of danger. Soldiers defying their generals is commonplace. Thea couldn't guarantee that her orders, issued from across the Gulf, would be unconditionally carried out. Just as she was preparing to retreat, Barbara ran over, her face flushed. Why retreat? Yes, today's battle was too much to say. A conservative estimate is that at least a third of Gotham's criminals were eliminated, permanently. Batman, with his usual tactics, would have taken 2 years to capture. Barbara was still holding a figure. Look who I caught. Scarecrow. Haha, The former Gotham professor was already unconscious, blood oozing from a hole in his left shoulder. Seeing that he was intact, Thea felt a little regretful. It would have been inappropriate to kill him now that she had captured him. He was lucky. As for Barbara's question, seeing her so happy, Thea didn't want to dampen her enthusiasm, so she whispered, "We're running low on ammunition." Barbara's face paled instantly. Wouldn't this be the same as the group that had just been slaughtered? Turning to her father for confirmation, Thea, now a mastermind, asked, "What should we do?" "Don't worry, this place is huge. I've sent Catwoman out to explore. She knows the area well, so we can just make a long detour and head back." Thea knew her Arkham assault was coming to an end, and Batman would be leading the team next time. She couldn't help but sigh. After looking at the Scarecrow being carried away and inquiring about the results of the battle, he learned that the Claws had already fled, the Penguin was missing, and the pig-faced man, mistaken for a human due to his size, had been killed on the spot. Claw's escape was good news for him. Even if the Penguin had lived, Talia would have come to his rescue. Although Arkham hadn't been destroyed, the enemy's effective forces had been largely decimated, making the effort worthwhile. He ordered the main force to follow Catwoman, who had returned from her scouting, and returned to camp around 7th and Poplar Streets. Before leaving, Thea instructed Miss Firefly, with her arson talent maxed out, to set fire to the enemy, both to thwart their pursuit and to burn down the insane asylum. The retreat went smoothly. The major crime families, driven by the Court of Owl's interests, were reluctant to engage them head-on, and both sides tacitly agreed to return to their respective homes. Back at camp, everything was fine. At least Thea wasn't in trouble. She didn't rush to activate the tracker. The Court of Owls wasn't at its wits' end yet. They needed to wait. At dinner, the others gathered to discuss their next move. This time, Thea had become less vocal, delegating all the work to Batman. The two of them were fully aware of this role swap. Just then, a police officer whispered something in Gordon's ear. "I'll handle it. I'll be back soon," the old chief said, heading out. But before he could even leave, a shrill voice from outside shouted, "Jim, old friend, you must help me. Arrest me. Arrest me." The man seemed to be restrained by several people, but he continued to shout at the top of his lungs. Turning himself in? That was a rare occurrence, but it was obvious that the only person Gordon could consider an old friend was the unlucky Penguin. "I hadn't expected this guy to have such tenacity and such a strong will." Even a strong man like Bane, struck by Thea's freezing arrow, was practically mad, yet this guy was still alive and kicking. It was truly remarkable. "Take him to the surveillance room and question him," Bruce, now the leader, told the old director. He couldn't barge in. No one in the room was wearing a mask. Robin and the others were irrelevant, but Thea and Bruce were celebrities, and their identities couldn't be revealed. They lost interest in their meal and went to see Gotham's former underworld king. The Penguin in the surveillance room looked utterly miserable, his hair disheveled, like a ghost. His once limp leg had completely rotted away, and he had been supported all the way by his loyal men. He probably knew they were watching him from the security cameras, sobbing into the camera, denouncing his own evil deeds, his message being, "You must arrest me immediately." "What should we do with this guy?" asked the police chief, Gordon. This guy was clearly afraid of death, using the excuse of turning himself in, but in reality, he was fleeing. Anyone with an above-average IQ would understand, but his status prevented him from being kicked out. His gaze unconsciously turned to Thea, seeking her advice. He truly didn't understand how the Alliance's blood feud should be avenged. Looking at the high-end, classy ceremony, would his announcement of his arrest trigger a chain reaction? Was it necessary to sacrifice countless officers for a major criminal? It would be a bit of an exaggeration to say Thea was now buried in the hole she had dug, but at least she was halfway there. She couldn't say it was all a facade during the day. Her connection to the Alliance was shady, and the only way forward was to keep it secret. She pondered over it, unable to speak, and could only pass the buck. "Let Uncle Bruce decide," she said lightly, before turning and leaving the surveillance room. Batman was in a quandary. With his intelligence, he could tell Thea didn't care. Only Talia could have frightened the Penguin so terribly. But therein lay the dilemma. He didn't want to see Talia, yet he didn't want to let the criminal go. He considered returning to bed and feigning illness for a few days, blaming Thea for the crime, but she'd already fled. After careful consideration, principle prevailed. Lock him up, HMPH, Catwoman. understanding his inner thoughts, assumed he still wanted to see his old flame. She slammed the door and walked out, agitated. Feeling misunderstood, Batman went outside to find some fresh air. Unexpectedly, he saw Thea, presumably his sister-in-law, sitting in a tree, gazing into the distance. He wanted to have a conversation with this clever and resourceful woman, hoping to ascertain her true feelings. But he couldn't climb a tree right now, his back wasn't fully healed yet. He walked under the tree and whispered, "What are you thinking about?" Thea jumped down. "I'm thinking about my father and brother." She wasn't lying. She didn't know if she had ruined Oliver's chance, but she didn't care. She just wanted to bring him back to Star City so the whole family could be together. As for Green Arrow and Talia, to hell with them. Chapter 113, A Family of Three. Batman, a master of psychology and a researcher of micro-expressions, immediately recognized her sincerity and felt a pang of sympathy. He had lost both his parents, while she had lost her father and brother. Their fates were truly similar. But he still wanted to clarify his question. So many people died during the day, do you feel guilty? Those were bad guys, and the police killed them. We're a country ruled by law. These people who resisted deserve death. Thea sometimes couldn't understand the hero's logic, but she couldn't argue with him now. She shifted her focus, blaming the police for everything. It wasn't me, I'm fine with it. Batman was also stunned by her sophistry. Her words were absolutely correct, undeniably true. But he wasn't ready to give up. But we're just beating the criminals to death. Isn't that inappropriate? Knowing he wouldn't give up until she got to the bottom of it, Thea summoned the same energy she'd used in her debate with Old Ma last year and launched into another argument. Arresting criminals and bringing them to the police station is law enforcement. If they resist and are beaten to death, it's also law enforcement. There's no contradiction. Our operation today isn't just a small-scale arrest, it's a war between good and evil. There can only be one victor, and this war isn't over yet. Thousands of citizens are still waiting to be rescued. Without giving him a chance to reply, Thea continued, I admire your actions, but from what I've seen in Gotham recently, Gotham isn't just lacking Batman, it's also lacking Bruce. What do you mean? Batman was confused by her words. It's literally what it says. You're Batman by night, and a playboy by day. I think it's a bit of a waste of Bruce's prestigious status. Commissioner Gordon is retiring soon. Who will be in charge of Gotham during the day? Have you considered this? What do you mean? Bruce, with his incredibly intelligent mind, instantly understood her meaning, but he still didn't dare to confirm it. Try to take over the position of police commissioner after Commissioner Gordon retires. With your connections and wealth, you could do a better job than the old commissioner. The two weren't close friends, so Thea was just giving a general suggestion, telling him to divert his attention and deal with those politicians and financial groups. It would be much easier to take on the Court of Owls himself. But her unscripted words really resonated with Batman, and he pondered their deeper meaning. Gordon had been a police officer when he was a child, and they had worked together for so many years. Only after hearing Thea's words did he realize how old his old friend really was. It's true that the light is darkest. He hadn't considered the future of the police department. The old commissioner really deserved a break. He'd been through so many dangers over the years, kidnapped countless times by criminals. If it were him, he wouldn't have had that problem. Was he afraid of being kidnapped? Haha. He nodded to Thea, promising to think about it, and left with a heavy heart. It wasn't until he walked away that Thea found a clean patch of grass to sit down, muttering to herself, he's gone far away. Big sister, come out. Talia's figure flashed behind a tree trunk not far away. She didn't carry a bow and arrow, but a long sword on her waist. You are not my sister, isn't that nonsense? Thea was without a hood and glasses at this time. And anyone could see that she and Talia were not related by blood. It's obvious. Thea picked up a small stone on the ground and threw it into the distance. Talia had no intention of taking action, and also found an open space to sit down. The two were about 3 meters apart, looking at her with bright eyes. Where did you learn your martial arts? Thea smiled and said nothing. How could I reveal my secrets to you so easily? Are you bullying me because I'm young and hot-headed? Talia was prepared for her silence, analyzing the situation on her own. You certainly weren't trained in Mandrabert. Are you a descendant of a certain generation of lieutenants? There was no way around it. The ninja master lived for so long, and he had hundreds of lieutenants who served him. While most of them died in Mandrabert, there were always a few exceptions. These people's stories spread like wildfire, and Talia had no way of confirming them. You don't want to attract the ninja master's attention to Gotham, do you? Since they couldn't see the light of day, that was easy. Yes, Thea nodded, agreeing on that point. According to the rules of the Alliance, I will withdraw and no longer participate in the affairs here. Since you seem to be somewhat pleasing to my eye, I'd like to remind you that the Court of Owls has discovered a secret weapon and is currently activating it. Huh? This news surprised Thea. The court had so many hidden weapons up its sleeve. Even at this point, could there still be a weapon to turn the tables? What is it? She asked eagerly. Talia smiled smugly. I don't know. I just heard they stopped the human enhancement experiments, and that Dr. Hugo is working on it. Seeing Thea lost in thought, she tossed her a metal plaque to her. I owe you a favor this time. If you need anything, come find me in Russia. With that, she hurried off into the woods, disappearing in a few sprints. This half-spoken approach frustrated Thea. Trust between people was so hard to build. What kind of weapon was it? She couldn't think of anything else Gotham could possibly have. She could only shout to the right, did you hear what she said? What do you think it was? I'm so confused. How would I know? Catwoman walked over to Thea and lay down on the ground, a grass root still in her mouth, her eyes vacant as she stared at the fading sunset. You three have chosen me, an outsider, for counseling, right? Come on, let's get back to talking. She's gone, isn't that great? You and Bruce can have some time alone together again. Let's not go to Star City this time, let's go to Metropolis. Thea remembered their unique way of traveling so vividly. No money. Catwoman felt gloomy at the mention of this topic, and so did Thea, who had a semi-mentorial relationship with Ms. Shiva. The big sister was so cruel. Look at how much she'd pushed Catwoman to make her daughter's life comfortable. She was about to say something more, but Catwoman interrupted her, pulling out a scroll from her bag. I got a painting from Killer Moth. Take a look at it. I'll sell it to you. A painting? Thea felt like her ancestors had never had any artistic talent. You're talking to me about explosives and swords, not paintings. Besides, she was broke. If you don't talk about money, we can still be friends. But it wouldn't be appropriate to refuse outright, so she just took it, wanting to take a look first. The scroll was short, less than a meter long and wide. It was evidently very worn, having been repaired by a skilled hand, but Catwoman's violent cuts had reduced its value by at least half. The subject matter was also quite monotonous, seemingly depicting a jungle with a winding gravel path. Beyond that, there was nothing else, no figures or animals. It could barely be considered a landscape. Chapter 114 Weird Scroll. It was supposed to be a perfectly ordinary painting, but even within it, Thea felt her relatively strong willpower being continuously drained. Meanwhile, whispers echoed from the scroll, the sky, and the trees. It would have been fine if she could make them out, but they were so soft they seemed to be blown away by the wind, and no matter how hard she concentrated, she couldn't make out a single word. Hey, what's wrong with you? Catwoman waited for her to respond, but after a long wait, she gently nudged her. Me, Thea, unsure of what was happening, cautiously glanced at the scroll again. The previous overwhelming suction had dissipated, but she couldn't tell whether it was her tinnitus or something else, but she could still hear the faint whispers in the air. There was definitely something wrong with this painting, but was it just her, or was it affecting everyone? Thea had to ask Catwoman if she felt any unusual symptoms. What era do you think this painting is from? The software shows it. Catwoman nearly gave Felicity away, then quickly corrected herself. I think it's thousands of years old. Thea didn't care about her slip of the tongue. She needed one last confirmation. She unfolded the scroll and asked Catwoman, which master of the time do you think left this brushwork? Catwoman had actually examined it several times. If she could tell its origin, she would have sold it for money long ago. She glanced at it casually and said, I don't know. Thea's peripheral vision kept watching her facial expressions, but nothing happened. Catwoman lay there lazily, a stark contrast to her previous absent-mindedness. Is this thing meant for me? The thought suddenly popped into her mind. Of course, buy it yourself. Asking the price, Catwoman felt a little embarrassed. Selling such a shabby, obviously stolen, piece of art from an unknown source to a friend was against her principles. But she was truly in dire straits. A hero's worth is a penny earned, and a heroine is a hero too, so she didn't feel any pressure. She offered what she considered a low price. Though Thea was poor, A lean camel is still bigger than a horse, even per, she was still a billionaire. With a few quick transactions, the money was out, and they both happily completed the deal. Catwoman, feeling she'd ripped off a fat sheep, fled in fear of her regret. Thea didn't feel cheated. If the painting wasn't unusual, she wouldn't have paid such a high price. She secretly smirked at Catwoman's blindness, promising a life of poverty. Back at camp, they met to discuss Talia's mention of the superweapon. Batman played dumb, not even asking where she got the information. Gordon and the others didn't think much of it. As they discussed the matter, they were all a bit bewildered. As locals, they had no idea their city had any powerful weapons. The old director interrogated the Penguin and Scarecrow again, but to no avail. Lyra's underlings also failed to provide any significant information. It was rumored that Bane had finally regained consciousness after 2 days and had disappeared from sight, retreating to Arkham to recuperate. The remaining major crime families were vying for the Penguin and Scarecrow's men in territories that had survived their slaughter. Several of the families engaged in fierce fighting, and the Court of Owls offered no intervention. In short, aside from the elusive, high-powered weaponry, everything else was good news. Thea traded a red leather jacket for a high-density Kevlar suit provided by Batman. The Wayne Group, with its long history in biopharmaceuticals, was considered a global leader in micromolecular composite materials. Of course, to maintain her style, the suit remained primarily red. The suit was incredibly durable, offering immunity to close-range pistol rounds and preventing rifle bullets from 100 meters from catching in its fibers. However, Thea declined the cape Batman had given her free with the suit. What else could it do besides look good? How many times has Supergirl's red cape been grabbed by the enemy, and then pinned to the ground and beaten? Why didn't you learn from such a painful lesson? But seeing that the material of the cape was very exquisite, Thea didn't refuse. With Batman's regretful look as if you didn't appreciate it, she handed it to Felicity as a souvenir. Her trip to Gotham, which was in dire straits, was not in vain. Batman has been constantly adjusting his physical condition these days. His recovery ability is really strong. Injuries that would take ordinary people at least 100 days to recover from, he almost heals in less than a month. As the second most powerful force in the camp, Thea took someone else's combat uniform and had to take time to accompany him to do some physical recovery training. Batman hadn't recovered to his best, but he was able to fight Thea on equal terms. The two had a heavy punch and a light punch, so they were evenly matched. Thea's fighting skills, with increasing combat experience, were gradually reaching perfection, and she was close to developing her own unique style. It was certain that she would soon appear on Prometheus's list of 30 fighters. When Barbara asked about Wing Chun, they both admitted they knew it wasn't some secret. However, Batman's training was unsettling, so Thea had to act as a temporary instructor. Strangely enough, since Thea had stepped down from her command, Barbara, who had always been critical of her, had actually taken the initiative to ask her out twice, and their relationship had eased. Thea spent the rest of her time crafting her various arrowheads, using all the necessary equipment and raw materials, all paid for by the Wayne Corporation. She plundered extensively, replenishing her high-tech arrowheads to 10. She also used Catwoman's connections to obtain a large amount of Firefly's kerosene, creating 10 flaming arrows. While Bane was recuperating from his injuries, several city officials were rescued by Commissioner Gordon. Their plump, white skin didn't look like they had been abused. The mayor, in charge, was terrified by the force Commissioner Gordon now controlled. It was only because there were no legends of the Chinchilla mutiny in foreign countries that he would have thought the old commissioner had some ulterior motive. He had handed over all the city's power to him, then, under the pretext of being severely injured, stayed home and refused to come out. Thea was busy during the day, and at night, when no one was around, she studied the scroll. She had used various instruments to measure it, and the scroll was indeed 1,000 years old, but she couldn't find the exact pattern. That night, she spent half the night daydreaming, restless and unable to sleep. The faint whispering drifted in her ears again, but no matter how hard she listened, she couldn't make out what it was saying. Just as she was thinking, "I'm not going to catch Gotham's epidemic and become schizophrenic, am I? Characters with dual personalities in anime are so impressive, but I really don't want to end up like that. Come here. I can help you. I'm not a bad person." This voice seemed different from the previous ones, a muffled one, as if it came from underground. "Go check it out." She made up her mind immediately. Of course, it was not because the other party said he was not a bad person or something. Nowadays, no bad person says he is bad. Every villain who was defeated originally had lofty ideals. So she just listened to this and analyzed the specific issues when they met. Chapter 115 Bloodline, additional chapter for the captain. Ever since switching to the Kevlar combat suit provided by Batman, the old G-suit has been eliminated. The new suit is crush-resistant, bulletproof, and sharp weapon resistant, and offers excellent breathability and moisture retention. While not as quick as Superman or Supergirl, where they could just rip their shirts and fly away, it's still quite efficient compared to the cumbersome dressing routine of the past. After changing without notifying anyone, Thea strapped her weapons onto her skateboard and flew towards the sound. Although she was no longer in command, she kept an eye on Gotham's weather. Every now and then, she would order the old director to fire a rocket. Out of admiration for her, the leadership obeyed without question. That little money was just gas for Batman, or rather, for the Batplane. The cumulus clouds were piling up at a rate that couldn't withstand her daily destruction. Even the once sinister nights were now illuminated by bright moonlight. She didn't know how much crime had decreased, but it was definitely more pleasant to the eye. By the bright moonlight, she determined her direction. The voice continued to drift. "Come here. I can help you." It seemed to be coming from the south. Gotham was a large port city, connected to the sea to the east and inland to the north and west. As for the south, Thea remembered only a deserted, muddy swamp. Despite her doubts, she focused, not reaching top speed. She observed her surroundings carefully, flying towards the sound. As the surroundings grew increasingly desolate, her senses gave no warning signals, and her infrared scans revealed no heat signatures from large animals. "I'm here, young man," a deep voice echoed from below. Thea drew a freezing arrow and knocked it onto her bow, gradually lowering her altitude, wary of any incoming attack. But when she reached an altitude of 20 meters, the surroundings remained barren. She looked around, up and down, but could see no signs of life nearby. "Where are you?" Though the question seemed foolish, she hadn't seen the supposed person who could help her. "I'm out. I'm not a bad person." The words were accompanied by the gurgling sound of water, and the swamp below began to ripple. A green creature, resembling an oversized slime monster, slowly emerged from the swamp. Vines flew everywhere, and tons of mud were lifted into the air by its sudden rise, only to fall back into the swamp under the pull of gravity. Thea stared at the 5-meter-tall green humanoid in front of her, stunned. Who was it? Or what was it? She glanced at a bow and arrow in her hand. Her once invincible archery skills no longer gave her any sense of security. Could her arrows harm this creature, 5 meters tall and weighing several tons? Only the skateboard beneath her feet gave her a glimmer of courage. If she couldn't defeat it, she could always run. Maybe. She couldn't utter a word, watching the towering green creature shift in place, rubbing its face and stretching its neck. Guessing she wasn't on the other party's radar, Thea shouted, "Did you call me?" There was no way she could help it. They were at least 50 meters apart, so she didn't need to shout, fearing he wouldn't hear her. But it took a full half-minute for the other party to respond. Those 30 seconds filled her with anxiety, fearing he'd unleash a powerful attack and instantly kill her. "It's me, young man," the green creature replied slowly, causing the impatient Thea's eyebrows to twitch. He couldn't defeat her, but he would definitely make him suffer. "What do you want from me?" She understood the principle of bowing her head when under someone's roof, and descended to his level, asking respectfully. "It's a long story, please be patient," the green creature said calmly. Thea didn't think he had any ill intentions, so she could only say she was very patient. They could talk until dawn. "I'm not a bad person." Thea couldn't understand why he kept insisting on this. Whether he was truly a bad person or just trying to fool himself remained to be seen. "I'm a botanist. An experiment led to my current state. My original name is Alec Holland, but of course no one calls me that anymore. They just call me Swamp Thing." The giant green creature, or rather, swamp monster, sighed as he recalled the past, but quickly put it aside and spoke of his purpose for today. "This world is full of supernatural beings, and I am one of them. Our leader detected an unusual reaction in you, so he ordered contact with you." Thea's mind was filled with questions. What did he mean? What unusual reaction was happening to me? Was my superpower about to awaken? In her memory, 1.0 Thea was just an ordinary person. She'd spent half her life under the wing of Green Arrow, her parents had died, and her boyfriends were all equally suicidal. It was practically impossible to get close to them without dying or getting hurt. Since when did being a star of destiny become considered a superpower? I don't quite understand what you mean. Are you here to warn me or arrest me? It wasn't that Thea always taunted people with malice, but everyone in this world was like that, burning and slicing people up at the drop of a hat. The swamp creature shook its massive head. I'm here to help you. I told you before. Yeah, that was great, that was powerful. Every villain starts out by saying they want to help others, and their methods of assistance are usually daggers, explosives, brainwashing, and the like. Thea remained silent, waiting for his next words. You must have obtained a relic. This relic has unlocked your bloodline. You are no mortal, you carry the legacy of the ancient sages. Relic? That wasn't hard to guess. The scroll Catwoman had obtained from Killer Moth was the beginning of everything. Unsure whether this would be a blessing or a curse, she'd brought the strange scroll with her before leaving. As for the bloodline, that puzzled her. Was it a fusion, or was it something she'd always had? It was a bloodline, and it sounded impressive. Things like Kekai Genkai and the D-Clan were all just perks brought by bloodline, but could she truly possess it? Although she was a little afraid the green creature would snatch her scroll, she still took it out. This is the relic you're talking about, right? As for the bloodline, could you explain it? A smile appeared on the swamp creature's lips, a smile he considered kind but Thea considered terrifying. Your bloodline is only known to you. I used to be a botanist, but now I'm not even human. I can't determine the source of your bloodline, only I know. What do I know? Thea's mind was almost in a mess. Just as she was about to say she couldn't remember, the scenery in the scroll in her last name, Merlyn, which she had never revealed to anyone, suddenly flashed through her mind. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Entering the Secret Realm. The Archmage Merlyn, a legendary figure known to every household in Europe and America, his encounter with King Arthur and the legend of the 12 Knights are almost universally known. But is this incredibly famous Merlyn the same as Malcolm Merlyn? She'd been searching through 8 generations of Quinn's family for the truth, and now it seemed so close to home. But was it truly the truth? She glanced at her own hands. Her fingers were long, white, and powerful, capable of expertly wielding a bow, a sword, or a dagger, yet they didn't look like they could fire fireballs or icicles. Furthermore, judging by bloodline, Malcolm's bloodline should be purer than hers. He'd spent his entire life engaged in conspiracy, but in the end, his fate had only worsened. There was no sign of him awakening any remarkable abilities in adversity, and his supposed bloodline hadn't helped him defeat Green Arrow or the Ninja Master in seconds. Could he possibly be a mage? Thea imagined Malcolm in his robes, throwing fireballs. It was so beautiful. You've got to be kidding me. But the swamp creature before her spoke with such conviction, as if it were real, that it didn't seem like a lie. Thea pointed at herself and asked, "Does my bloodline exist now?" "But I don't feel any difference." The swamp creature remained silent. Countless vines rose from the mud beneath him, and amidst the dazzling array of plants, they lifted a dark red vessel. As the clean, cup-like vessel emerged from the mud, Thea truly experienced the meaning of untainted by the mud. It was undoubtedly a treasure, but she was definitely not destined to possess it. As expected, the swamp creature spoke. "This is the awakening cup of Chief Shangdu's madam. It can successfully activate your bloodline. Whether or not it succeeds is up to you." Although Thea had never heard of this madam, she knew she was a major figure in her field. At this point, there was nothing to worry about. "How do I use it?" "Drop your blood into the cup. It will search your body for the holy relic, successfully unlocking the secret realm of inheritance." The swamp creature, perhaps aware of his somewhat intimidating appearance, didn't understand Thea's courage. Using his past human experience as a human, he figured if he were a young girl, he would have been unconscious for 10 minutes by now. He controlled the vines to place the cup on the ground and slowly retreated 2 steps. Thea descended from the air to the ground, not daring to leave her skateboard. She circled the unassuming cup twice, unable to detect anything amiss. "Come on, then." She rolled up her sleeves and slashed her arm. Crimson blood quickly coated the bottom of the cup. Just as Thea was wondering how much blood she needed to activate the device, she felt a hook grab her navel and yank upward. She tried to scream, but the gusting wind silenced her. She felt herself being squeezed into a narrow tube, her entire body engulfed by a massive blast of air, hurtling through this incredibly long passage at high speed. When she regained consciousness, she had only one thought: this user experience is terrible. She patted her butt and tried to stand, only to realize her combat uniform was gone. In its place was a beggar's outfit, enough to beg for food. Okay, calling it beggar's outfit is a bit of an exaggeration, but this coarse fabric coat was anything but luxurious. It looked thick, but the texture was incredibly rough. What was going on? Where's my underwear? Thea found herself feeling uncomfortable with just one piece of clothing, feeling a bit annoyed at the person who had designed this detail. But thankfully, she was a woman of the world, unconcerned with small matters. She hadn't brought her Kevlar, nor her bow, arrows, or dagger. Only the sword of Azrael, which she had seized earlier, lay quietly on the ground. She jumped twice. Thankfully her penis wasn't too large, so even without the support of her clothing, it wouldn't be much of a burden. This was good news, because the area around her looked a lot like the forest path in the painting, with tall trees and dense forests, hinting at the prospect of a battle. As the saying goes, don't enter a forest, but what choice did she have now? She drew her sword and slashed at a nearby tree. Not bad, this was her own sword, not a fake one. Looking around, it seemed the only thing in front of her was the gravel path. It was long, winding, and seemed to lead all the way to the top of the mountain. Thea took a deep breath, the lingering feeling of being without underwear lingering. She diligently applied the meditation techniques Lady Shiva had taught her, clearing away distractions and concentrating on ascending the mountain. The path was well maintained, and Thea couldn't tell if it was real life or a painting. She saw no animals or birds along the way. The surroundings were completely silent, and though there were occasional rustlings, her keen senses didn't disturb her. About a fifth of the way up the mountain, she received a warning, a tingling sensation that seemed to pierce her brain. A sneak attack. Thea quickly spotted her target, a figure, his face shrouded in black mist and covered in armor, leapt from a tree and slashed at Thea. The enemy was mid-air, his body exposed to flaws. This was theoretically the perfect opportunity to strike, but since she didn't know the strength of his armor, Thea chose to dodge. She dodged a powerful blow with a sideways roll, avoiding it. Without rising, Thea slashed directly at his unarmored foot with her sword. The figure in black mist armor reacted quickly, raising his foot to block her blade while simultaneously wielding his massive two-handed sword to chop off Thea's head. This guy was formidable. Using her agility, Thea maintained distance, focusing on defense, observing her opponent's attack patterns, waiting for an opening to determine the outcome. Through repeated exchanges, Thea gradually gained a better understanding of this man. Judging by his skill, he was no unknown figure in life. He wielded his two-handed sword with such ferocity that ordinary men would have been slain by him. This realization puzzled Thea. Was her bloodline truly Merlyn's? Why did the mage selection involve a duel, or were mages from Merlyn's time all warriors? Despite this confusion, she handled the situation with ease. Thanks to the ninja master's extensive knowledge of both ancient and modern times, Thea had already discerned his swordsmanship. It was the ancient English battle formation swordsmanship. She didn't know if it was the Knights of the Round Table, but she had learned it. Moreover, a master who had been at home for 800 years had thoroughly studied the methods and countermeasures of these sword techniques. Simply following these methods would give Thea a complete victory. Soon, Thea found the opening she had been waiting for. The Black Mist Knight used a two-handed thrust. She used the tip of her own blade to counter the knight's blade, deflecting the attack. Then, with a fierce dash, she plunged her sword into his face. The Black Mist Knight paused, his previous terrifying killing intent dissipating in an instant. He swung his sword to his right hand, knelt on one knee, performed a gesture Thea couldn't understand, and then vanished like a breeze. Chapter 117 Second Level. After dispatching the sneak attack from the Black Mist Knight, Thea remained vigilant, cautiously advancing towards the summit. The latter half of the journey could be described as uneventful. In fact, by the time she reached the halfway point, she had a general understanding of the situation. This level wasn't originally designed to allow a reserve mage apprentice to bludgeon a knight who blocked her path. If I'm not mistaken, it was to test the opponent's reaction speed and basic physical fitness, in essence, to identify those who could flee from danger and run quickly. But Master Merlyn probably couldn't have imagined that one of his descendants would have such a remarkable talent as Thea, who dispatched the obstacle with a few punches and kicks. The Black Mist Knight's martial arts were exceptional even today. The Merlyn's medieval ancestors would have been forced to flee in fear. It's unlikely that ancient martial arts could surpass modern ones. A skill inevitably becomes increasingly refined, honed over countless generations, and the final version is undoubtedly more powerful than the original. Of course, if there were internal force or true energy, that was another matter. Xia hadn't realized such power systems existed in this world. Otherwise, wouldn't a ninja master have transcended the tribulation and ascended to heaven after 800 years of hard training? Whoa, they reached the top. The mountain was truly high. Xia breathed, slamming her sword into the ground. Although she hadn't encountered any enemies along the way, she wasn't feeling relaxed. She wondered what her ancestors, chased all the way to the top, must have been exhausted. She hoped the second level wouldn't be too difficult. The ground before her was more like a square than a mountain top. The entire peak had been flattened. In the distance, a large, British-style palace stood, its gate a full 10 meters high, surrounded by several tall, broken, and incomplete statues of knights. Xia didn't rush to push the door. She decided to wait and see. Besides, considering the height of the gate, she didn't think she had the strength to push it open. It seemed the level's designers didn't want anyone to foolishly try. The two thick, wide doors slowly swung open. Thump, thump, heavy footsteps hammered at Thea's heart. As she stared in astonishment, a massive figure slowly emerged from behind the door. It had horns on its head, crimson yellow eyes, 4 legs and wings, and a body covered in lava-like scales. A tail stretched the length of its body. Red dragon? Fire dragon. Thea didn't know the creature's exact scientific name, but she knew she was no match for it. Not only herself, but even Bane wouldn't be able to defeat it even if he drained that entire jar of venom. Was Merlyn really going to recruit wizards? Had her previous assumptions been wrong? How could those medieval peasants and some unmarried nobles possibly defeat this thing? It was terrifying. Or was it that her first level was too unconventional, that the unconventional approach only made it more difficult? Thea glanced down at the sword in her hand. It didn't look like it could slay a dragon. Would she have to test her agility again? Would she have to sprint in while the red dragon attacked? That's not likely. Thea shook her head. The dragon had just crouched at the gate, showing no sign of rising. She instantly thought of 7 or 8 possibilities. From game guides from her past life to anecdotes from this fairy tale, but found none that matched her current situation. A headache perfectly described her current situation. Just as she was racking her brains over the purpose of the level's design, the distant red dragon seemed displeased with her inaction. Without even a preparatory action, it unleashed a fireball. Thea cursed inwardly. Did the mage apprentice have to be a dragon slayer to advance to the next class? Or were ordinary people in Merlyn's time so incredibly powerful that slaying a dragon was as easy as slaying a chicken? No skill was needed against a fireball the diameter of a wash basin. The color of the flames told her it was definitely hot. Even Miss Firefly's fire immunity wouldn't be able to withstand it. No choice but to run. Bang, boom. As she dodged the fireballs, Thea sought a way out. But this guy just stayed put at the gate. He tried to fight at range, but he had no bow and arrows, and even if he did, it would be useless. He wanted to fight in close combat? Are you kidding? I don't have 39 friends to help me right now. What do you mean by magic? Thea came here to learn magic, right? I don't know any at the moment. Huh? Running around in circles, blasted by the fire, Thea stumbled upon a patch of ground previously scorched by the fireball. It seemed like only flames, no chemical reaction to burn oxygen. Talking about oxygen in such a magical place was scientific or not, but Thea didn't care. She quickly ran to the edge of the fire pit and probed with her hand. Sure enough, there was no sign of heat. She dipped her sword into the pit, waited a few seconds, and then pulled it out. There was no sign of burning or high temperature on the blade. Could it be fake? No. She struck the edge of the fire pit with her sword again. The physical impact was still there. Vaguely understanding the purpose of this level, Thea stretched out her left hand, silently thinking pistol. Instantly, a Beretta 92F was in her hand. The gun's dead weight felt incredibly real. She tried firing it again, and the sound, trajectory, and impact were exactly like a real gun. She understood, This was a test of the applicant's mental savvy. No matter what weapon they imagined, as long as they could defeat the opposing red dragon, they'd pass. It was all about imagination, wasn't it? With a mindset of an earthling from a previous life, Thea feared no one. So what about Master Merlyn? Did he think a dragon was the most formidable creature for ordinary people? Strength aside, his insight wasn't much different. Thea first imagined a Terminator version of the governor. A burly, muscular man instantly took shape, and upon receiving the command, he charged forward, Gatling gun in hand. The red dragon was indeed formidable, responding to the governor's provocation with a basin-sized fireball. Neither side dodged, and within half a minute, the governor was heroically killed. Thea didn't waste a moment. Her imagination raced to the giant robot from Pacific Rim. She was operating the Storm Crimson, built by an unspeakable nation. The machine, draped in crimson, stood 150 meters tall, its 3 arms each wielding a serrated broadsword. It charged forward with unstoppable force. The red dragon, lying on the ground, pretending to be dead, nearly popped its eyes out at the sight of such a massive beast. Though a mere illusion, its magical energy preserved its intelligence and experience. With over 1,000 years of dragonhood, he swore he'd never seen a humanoid this large. Was this the legendary Titan? 150 meters tall, a solid metal construct weighing over 1,000 tons. Taking on a red dragon 20 feet tall and less than 100 feet long was a gruesome experience. Thea felt the most exhilaration she'd ever experienced. With one hand pinning the dragon's neck to immobilize it, she used her remaining 2, her broadswords, to launch a furious slash. Initially employing a few sword techniques, she eventually abandoned them altogether. Horizontal and vertical slashes were sufficient to deal with the beast. Chapter 118 Written Examination, for the Hallmaster Huolian Hondan, additional 1/2. The frustrated red dragon, without even using wing slap or shadow flame, was pinned to the ground by Thea, who then proceeded to hack and slash at it. Theoretically, a headless dragon would be dead, but this was clearly an illusion, so whether the fatal injury was to the head was still unclear. Unaware of the value of her time, Thea minced the majestic dragon like mincemeat, slicing it into chunks less than half a meter long and wide. She rummaged around in the area, finding no crafting materials like dragon crystal or dragon core, and sighed. She had just discovered that this level also had a trick to it. There were 4 broken knight statues at the entrance. The designer's intention was to use these statues as a model for a classic scene involving a knight and a mage teaming up to slay a dragon. But perhaps some ancestor, perhaps misunderstood or deliberately creating trouble for future generations, had brought the statues to life, engaging in a fierce battle with the red dragon. The 4 statues, now missing limbs, lay like garbage, their meaning hidden from anyone who hadn't examined them closely. At least she'd passed. Thea controlled the robot to land on the ground. It was 150 meters, and she couldn't abruptly cancel it, or she'd fall to her death. She grabbed her sword, skirted the pile of flesh, and headed for the hall. Shortly after entering the hall, the 2 doors closed in a cliched manner. She curled her lips. What a lack of creativity. While it looked spacious and tall from the outside, the interior wasn't very spacious. After a few steps, Thea came to a desk, piled haphazardly with parchment. 3 quills sat tilted on the surface, and a small bottle with very little ink was casually left on the floor. Thea became increasingly certain that something was wrong with the setting itself. It was so disorganized, it didn't seem like a test for the future. There wasn't even anyone to clean the desk. And there weren't even any instructions along the way. Even if you didn't ask for a system wizard, at least put up a sign to let the examinees know what to prepare. Regardless of the test, she'd better tidy up her desk first. But just as Thea touched the parchment, a massive hourglass suddenly appeared where nothing had been. A rough estimate suggested it was okay, the sand wasn't flowing too fast, so she should have an hour. But what was she supposed to do with that hour? Thea looked around again. The surroundings were quite ornately decorated, carpets, murals, lamps, and a whole host of other decorative items. This couldn't be a place for a test to find clues and solve a case. Thea scratched her head. After all, when Old Man Merlyn was active, the great-grandfather of Sherlock Holmes's author hadn't even been reincarnated yet. But just in case, she looked around. Many of the items were merely decorative and impossible to remove. After wasting 10 minutes, Thea finally identified her target. It was the item on the desk. She picked up a piece of paper and examined it carefully. What a mess. Thea set aside the paper, which described the specific application of mana and its secondary connection to earth and water. She couldn't understand the paper herself, and neither would her peasant ancestors. She spent another 5 minutes sifting through all the parchments, finding the few she could understand and reading them. It was simple indeed. The pages contained basic common sense about the composition of the universe, the basic framework of the world. For Thea, whose learning ability had been enhanced to 2.0, it was no problem at all. Using her superhuman intelligence, she forcibly memorized the information that contradicted her existing worldview. She then began to read the scrolls she couldn't understand. Realizing that the upcoming exam was likely a written test, and since the quill ink didn't look like a souvenir, Thea brought back the skills she'd learned from her previous life to cope with the exam-oriented education system. Some of the information had some similarities to modern physics, while others seemed like nonsense. She didn't care whether she understood it or not, and just memorized it all without hesitation. The study methods from that previous life had helped immensely. Combined with her current formidable memory, she could boast that she would rival even a ninja master or Batman in terms of learning speed. She memorized over 10 pages of parchment, tens of thousands of words of content that defied common sense, in less than half an hour. She spent the last 10 minutes combing through her entire memory. The knowledge was incredibly disparate. Although it formed part of a larger system, Thea felt it was too fragmented, like someone had haphazardly thrown together someplace as a prank. As for the truth, she no longer cared. The entire examination site looked like it had been used numerous times. The painting she had obtained had likely passed through many generations. The erosion of time and human damage had left Thea with a feeling that it hadn't been this difficult in the beginning. Perhaps some instructions had been left along with the scroll, passed down to future generations. But now that she had reached this point, no matter what happened, she could pass this level. She could sense this in her heart. She calmed her breathing, maintaining her best form, and slowly adjusted her mind. When the sand in the hourglass had completely drained, a fresh piece of parchment appeared on the tabletop, as expected. Everything else had vanished, leaving only the quill and inkwell. Thea immediately took the parchment and examined it. There were fewer than 20 questions on the entire page, all very basic, dealing with topics like the composition of the world, the different colors of flames, and the refraction of light. She knew she'd been tricked by this chaotic environment again. The rest of the exam wasn't even part of the test, just the first few pages would be enough. Thea gave an unnamed person the finger. "Don't let me see you in person, or I'll beat you to death." Although the questions were simple, she answered them diligently. In less than 5 minutes, she finished them all. After checking them several times to make sure they were all correct, Thea was stunned. Who should she hand this paper to? "Hey, I'm done, is anyone there?" she shouted foolishly into the empty room, but no one came out. Oh my God, could it be that our ancestor Merlyn made the exam extra long to accommodate his descendants who had just learned to read? It was so possible. In the Middle Ages, even a king who could write his own name was considered highly educated, let alone ordinary people. Kings back then were more like gang bosses than national leaders. Many nobles couldn't write their own names, so they simply wore a seal on their wrists and signed it when it was their turn. She waited patiently for a while. But still no one paid any attention. "Fine. Since you're so confident, I won't hold back." Xia left her seat and surveyed her surroundings again. While her hopes were slim, she wondered if she could find something valuable. Using the treasure hunting techniques Catwoman had taught her, Xia began to explore the walls and the decorations. Her efforts paid off. She found nothing on the walls, but she did discover a pitch-black dagger hidden within an ornament shaped like a deer antler. Chapter 119 The Cruel Ant. The dagger was only palm-sized, double-edged, and not particularly elaborate. The handle was unadorned, revealing nothing more than an ordinary weapon. Xia toyed with it for a moment, unable to discern any hidden secrets. Unsure whether she could carry it with her, she slipped it onto her belt and continued her search. Time flew by, and by the time she'd double-checked that the room was empty, over an hour had already passed. With no clock in the room, she couldn't estimate the exact time, only a rough estimate. Bored, she rested her legs on the table and closed her eyes. Just as she grew increasingly impatient and was about to rise and push the door, the answer sheet vanished silently, just as it had in the beginning. Then, unprepared, a formless flame erupted, seemingly from within her. Wow, what the hell? She didn't know what to do with this invisible, intangible thing. She felt her blood desperately rushing toward the flames, transforming vast quantities of it into an unknown substance. Every second felt like an eternity. As her blood began to flow out inexplicably, she felt her ability to think weakened, her mind blank. Who was she? Where was she now? Instincts gradually took over her body, and her consciousness was slowly swallowed by the endless void. When she regained consciousness, Xiao found that she had left the secret realm of the scroll and returned to the starting point. The swamp monster was still staring at her from a distance with its blood-red eyes. She felt around her body and found that the Kevlar was still intact. The dagger she had found earlier was hanging conspicuously at her waist. But she was in no mood to care about the dagger now. She just felt sore all over and had no strength at all. What happened to me? And how long has it been? The target of the question was naturally the swamp monster not far away, but her voice was a little soft and she didn't know if it could hear. The swamp creature examined her from head to toe, his piercing gaze giving Thea goosebumps. He spoke slowly. You truly possess extraordinary potential. Your bloodline has been successfully activated. Whether or not she had potential, Thea didn't know. She felt like she was dying. Her strength was less than 30% of her usual, her breathing unsteady, her steps weak, and she broke out in a sweat after taking just a few steps. She checked her pulse, and her heart rate was much slower than usual. She touched her face, and it was no longer supple. How badly injured am I? She tried to feel the swamp creature's so-called bloodline, but she felt dizzy and blurry, seeing everyone twice. This must be a symptom of blood deprivation. The swamp creature seemed to notice she was so weak that a gust of wind could blow her away, and he slowly began to explain. Don't worry, this is a good thing. When you first awaken, there's a process of re-refining pure blood. As for why you're so weak, I don't know. After all, I'm not a magician. The swamp creature spread his hands, but his massive 5-meter height didn't look at all cute. Thea was too exhausted to complain. Your words are as good as nothing, damn it. Even though she was so weak she couldn't even defeat Commissioner Gordon. Commissioner Gordon, HU, who's scolding me? She was lucky she'd ridden a skateboard and could still leisurely fly back to camp. She waved goodbye to the swamp monster. He was quite friendly. Judging by his size, he wasn't a magical type. It was pointless to ask. She should just go back and rest. This is for you. The swamp monster put away the cup and pulled a lush green fruit from the ground, handing it to Thea. What is this? Thea looked at it. It was the size of a coconut, shiny and oily. Its emerald green color reminded her of some cyanide, and its surface was covered in strange patterns. Was it edible? Was it not a devil fruit, or perhaps a natural one? But Thea knew with a flick of her toes that it couldn't be. I don't know whose bloodline you've awakened, but the earth can bear all things. This fruit can further stimulate your bloodline. I gave it to you specially. I can see every corner of the city. You've brought light back to Gotham. You're a good child, and justice needs your strength. Despite being given a good guy card by a 5-meter-tall green creature, Thea was still quite pleased. It seemed her daily calls for rain had paid off. Smiling, she accepted the fruit. Could this thing stimulate another bloodline? It seemed quite effective. Her previous experience had already frightened Thea, and she was already extremely weak. She decided to keep the fruit for now. Watching the swamp monster slowly sink to the ground, Thea didn't bother to count her gains. She found her way back to the camp and staggered back. Fortunately, the two recent Arkham raids, along with the clashes between several major crime families, had mobilized the city's thugs. She avoided the spectacular scene of being greeted by rocket launchers upon her arrival in Gotham that day. This allowed her to safely fly back to her base. She'd been planning to quietly retreat to her room, but she'd already alerted Felicity, who lived next door. Catwoman and she'd been getting closer lately. They were playing video games in the room, and upon hearing the noises, they both came out to ask, Thea, what's wrong? Catwoman had been avoiding her these days because she considered her a big shot, but now that they were face to face, she couldn't pretend she didn't know her. Seeing her look off, her face pale and her steps unsteady, she asked quickly. How should she explain it? Just saying she'd gained a bloodline or something would be fine, but Batman's hatred of anything unnatural was a concern. She had to worry about losing the reputation she'd worked so hard to build. As she was racking her brains for a lie, Felicity, always imaginative, studied her for a moment before saying, with a tone of sudden realization, You're having your period? It's so heavy this time, it took Thea a moment to realize what she meant. Fuck you. You can bleed so much at once. She'd lost nearly a third of her blood, but Thea reflected, realizing she'd indeed been hurt in the past few days. While the volume of shipments was a bit excessive, it was still an explanation. Though a little awkward, she acquiesced to the truth. Catwoman instantly grasped the meaning and, eager to help her back to her room like an old woman, volunteered to make her some brown sugar water. Barbara, who lived nearby, either out of curiosity or genuine concern for her comrades, jumped out of Robin's room without a word upon hearing the news. Batman, who was in recovery training, rushed over upon hearing of her injury, but found herself surrounded by women. Using his vast knowledge, he outsmarted Lex Luthor's intelligence, deciphered the situation, and then scurried away. Chapter 120 Talent. For the next few days, Thea used her period as an excuse to handle everything. It was a powerful excuse, and everyone who saw her smiled warmly, asking about her well-being and fearing she might die. With her blood production starting to kick in, and Catwoman Barbara occasionally sending her treats like black bone chicken with brown sugar to replenish her energy, she had largely regained her fighting strength and was able to properly process her gains. She had actually received a message the night before. It was a mysterious message, seemingly emerging from within her soul. There was no need to read or comprehend it, it was a skill she had mastered naturally and instinctively. From the message, she realized that every descendant of the Merlyn family, upon successfully awakening, possessed a skill similar to an instinct, or a spell-like ability. This skill required no external conditions like magic or gestures, it could be activated with just enough physical strength. Upon observation, a silver-white unicorn tattoo had appeared on her left shoulder blade, capable of both visibility and invisibility. This tattoo could be considered a dual skill. During the day, the tattoo's yang pattern continuously absorbs sunlight. Activating the skill summons a unicorn to accompany it in battle until it's cancelled. At night, the tattoo's yin pattern absorbs the power of moonlight, harnessing the power of shadows to create a clone with the same abilities as Thea's original. A unicorn? Thea pondered for a moment, opened the door, checked to see if anyone was paying attention, and quickly closed the doors and windows. Hoping the noise wouldn't be too loud, Thea silently prayed, focusing her attention on the tattoo. Activate. A faint puff of white smoke passed, and the long-awaited right-hand man appeared before him. Thea frowned at the creature, no bigger than her palm. And sure enough, a closer look revealed a horn on its forehead. It wasn't just a random horse or donkey. The little unicorn hadn't figured out where it was. Drowsily, it stood up from Thea's bed, glancing around. Finding it unfamiliar surroundings, it faltered for a moment, huddled its hooves, and nervously surveyed its surroundings. When it looked up and spotted Thea, a living being, it relaxed instantly, its large eyes flickering at her. Seeing she didn't react, it licked her hand. It was quite adorable, and Thea couldn't help but stroke its mane. It was incredibly soft and pleasant to the touch. It looked like this creature wouldn't be able to fight anytime soon. Was it really going to rely on its cuteness to overpower its enemies? That night, she tried the clone technique again, and was quite pleased with the results. Unlike the clone technique in a certain Japanese manga, the cloned creature was a physical entity, capable of attacking and speaking. It wouldn't vanish into smoke when struck, but it still dealt the expected lethal damage, and Thea's combat abilities could be fully mastered by the physical entity. However, the equipment she possessed couldn't be copied, so if an enemy knew the situation and attacked her while she was holding a weapon, she would be stunned. However, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. It could be modified, for example, with one holding a knife and the other a dagger, and they could sway left and right a few times to confuse the enemy. Xia once experimented alone in her room. After activating the skill, the stamina drain doubled. If it used to drain once per unit time, it now drained twice. Damage taken by the clone didn't affect the original. Theoretically, even if the clone died 100 times, Xia wouldn't be in any trouble. However, she also couldn't learn anything the clone learned from reading. They could only share basic information, which was a mixed blessing. Improving the power of the yang and yin lines was simple. Expose the yang line to the sun and the yin line to the moon, increasing their power. Unicorns, with accumulated sunlight, grow from juveniles to adults, eventually even growing wings and becoming the royal family of unicorns. Once they reach adulthood, the two, or rather, one person and one beast, can merge, and Xia will automatically possess most of the unicorn's abilities and traits. The night clones can also become more agile and intelligent with the accumulation of moonlight, and even 2 or 3 clones are possible. To ensure the unicorn's rapid growth, Xia could proudly declare herself one of those who can benefit from sunlight. We can add a lounge chair next to Superman and Supergirl someday, and we can all hang out together. She wondered what talent her predecessors had acquired. Yes, for the sake of convenience, she just called it a talent. She felt the clone talent suited her perfectly. After all, her mind was now preoccupied with killing and fighting, and the skill had invisibly doubled her combat power. If she wasn't afraid of exposing herself, even without her technological equipment, Batman wouldn't be her match in a one-on-one fight. Speaking of blood concentration, the final massive blood loss couldn't be ignored. Despite limited information at this point, Thea could still analyze it. It was a process of burning blood back to its ancestral source. She could sense 2 drops of golden blood near her heart. Perhaps she had completed the trial too well, but the purification process was at full throttle. The energy that could theoretically transform only 1 drop of blood was supercharged, resulting in 2 drops. This also indirectly contributed to her weakness. A normal person would be devastated by 15% blood loss, but she had lost a full 30%. Seeing the suspected devil fruit given to her by the swamp monster, she didn't dare try it rashly. She had to at least have full blood. The scroll that had once enabled all of this was completely destroyed. As it vanished, it also transmitted a stream of information to her, but unlike the clear information about her innate talent, it was fragmented and disjointed. Through guesswork, Thea could only deduce that an ancestor, long ago, had been coerced into a secret realm by a lover mishap. Then, after a long series of unexplained messages, he destroyed a crucial inheritance guide, presumably a parchment, and passed away alone. It was a truly tragic story. Thea felt no sympathy for this ancestor. He had destroyed the instructions for the assessments along the way, leaving her in a state of utter disbelief. Others' trials might have been normal difficulty, but hers was definitely hellish. This ancestor, who had caused her so much trouble, also served as a warning to Thea. She needed to keep her cards close to her chest. This guy was likely boasting too much, attracting the attention of those without bloodlines, opportunities, or inheritance. I have what others don't, so why don't you be more humble? Ultimately, he was eliminated before he could even master his divine power. Put yourself in their shoes. If someone possessed superpowers that you didn't, how would you feel? You'd be jealous, of course, and would do whatever it took to get them. Such people have existed throughout history. If, by chance, this person possessed patience and cunning, you could only hope to strike back at the crucial moment. Thea instantly thought of someone who possessed these qualities, and someone she could somehow connect with: Batman and Green Arrow's father-in-law, the Ninja Master. This old man possessed no superpowers, relying on the immortality pool to survive for 800 years. He'd undoubtedly encountered supernatural beings and aliens, and Thea was the first to doubt his envy of all the supernatural powers. The more Thea pondered, the more she felt that the 1.0 version of Thea, attacked by the Ninja Master, suffered irreparable injuries. After that, Thea's overall abilities began to decline drastically, and she even withdrew from Team Arrow. Was there some hidden secret she still didn't know? Green Arrow has so many people around him: Laurel, Sarah, Felicity, each one so important, so why would he attack Thea? Throughout the series, the Grandmaster only personally confronts 2 people, Thea and Green Arrow. This raises numerous questions, and the truth is perhaps only known to the Ninja Master himself. Malcolm's story is also bizarre. Having lost his beloved wife, he came to Nandlebert alone. The Grandmaster immediately began teaching him, and in just 2 years, he was promoted to lieutenant. With 800 years of experience, doesn't it seem Malcolm's ambitions are merely a form of dependence? Various clues suggest he possesses knowledge of ancient bloodlines, even more than his descendants, given how much history has obscured. Could this also be a factor in his regard for Batman? The Wayne family also has a long history, with ancestral glories dating back to the Crusades. Overwhelmed with thought, she picked up the dagger she'd found in a previous trial. Initially, she'd thought the dark blade was rust, but after rubbing it a few times, she realized it was the same color. Several words were inscribed where the dagger met the handle. Now barely a mathematician's apprentice, Thea used the last scraps of knowledge she'd memorized in a search engine to finally decipher the meaning of those words after a day's work. Black Mist. Chapter 121: Concept of New Equipment. Through her bloodline transformation, Her perception had undergone a profound transformation. Thea's previously ethereal senses merged with a spiritual power derived from her bloodline, forming a faint energy, let's call it magic. When she used this magic to communicate with the inscriptions on the dagger, it was transformed and emitted through a special method. This energy consumed very little energy, consuming only the dagger's own energy, while the user merely acted as a guide. But this very function formed the fundamental difference between ordinary people and mages. Having played so many games, Thea quickly grasped the purpose of this weapon. It created a thick, pure black fog within her sight. It was unknown what the original designers had in mind, but it was impenetrable to outsiders, and anyone within it was completely invisible, including Thea, the caster. Was this originally intended for escape? But with the advancement of technology, smoke bombs have become available, making this dagger's magical effect somewhat useless. Furthermore, the fog only affected human vision, though thermal imaging could still reveal living beings within. Thea tossed the dagger around for a few moments. The protagonists would stumble and find storage rings, dragon eggs, and the like, but she only had a broken dagger. Her luck was truly terrible. She rewrote the parchment she had hastily memorized, searching for commonalities through the inscriptions on the dagger, but honestly, the results were disappointing. There were too few references. She did find some information online, stories about Merlyn and the Ghost Girl, and the Yeti versus the Wizard Merlyn. The information was so mixed it was hard to tell the real from the fake. Thea didn't dare practice blindly. Others were reaching obsessions at advanced levels. It would be ridiculous for her to stray from the path she was taking just starting out. She had no one to guide her. The swamp monster had mentioned Lady Xanadu, but he'd also said she was elusive, a descendant of some ancient race, immortal and immortal. The ninja master looked like a child compared to her. For someone like that, her sense of time is undoubtedly insignificant. It's very likely she won't realize her situation for another 10 years, and if she waits that long, she'll be gone. There are still a few magical heroes in this world, at least Thea knows Constantine's name, but she remembers him as a pervert reincarnated, so with her beauty, she'd better not get involved. Unable to figure out a solution, she could only take things one step at a time. First, she'd recover and return to peak condition, then consume the earth fruit given to her by the Swamp Thing. Although she was weak and couldn't practice with Batman, she didn't rest completely. Considering the increasingly formidable enemies ahead, she needed to improve her own abilities. Magic isn't something that can be mastered overnight, it requires extensive study and accumulation. Of course, like Shazam, who dreams of flying to the sky and shoulder to shoulder with the sun, the world is waiting for me to change it, and then shouts Shazam to the sky, a bucket-sized bolt of purple lightning strikes him, transforming the skinny boy into a muscular wizard standing 180 centimeters tall. Thea disdained this quick fix. How was it any different from the Guan-era possession from that unspeakable country? It didn't even increase one's own essence, and instead consumed a vast amount of essence and blood each time it was possessed. This method was sheer folly. Even in the immortal world, such people would be possessed in a matter of minutes, no matter what. Taking advantage of this period of prosperity, with her relationship with Batman at an all-time high, Thea asked to borrow the Bat Belt for a look. Bruce, a highly regarded junior, didn't refuse. Finally, Thea got to see the legendary belt. It had been touted as awe-inspiring, but upon closer inspection, it revealed a simple principle. While his weapons weren't suited to him, this particular nanotechnology was incredibly advanced, dazzling Thea. Batman's nanotechnology differed from Ray Palmer's. One nanoized his weapons, while the other nanoized himself. It was a classic example of someone starting from the same starting point, but ultimately taking different paths. Even if Batman were given a nanosuit, he'd be too proud to transform into a minifigure to fight. Similarly, the Atom couldn't use his various weapons, lacking his advanced martial arts foundation. This belt has greatly inspired Thea, and she's already begun developing new technological gadgets of her own. A skateboard wouldn't improve quickly enough, and it's completely inadequate against a brute like Bane. It might be a problem with just one or two, but America has a plethora of powerful villains. Her strength is already the weakest link in the bucket, increasingly limiting her abilities in both close combat and long-range archery. Taking all factors into consideration, she's set her sights on Marvel's Winter Soldier. Of course, she won't go so far as to chop off her arm and replace it with a metal one. Instead, she plans to use Batman's technology to nanoscale the metal arm, which will typically consist of 3 components: an armband, a bracelet, and a ring, all common female accessories that won't look out of place in any occasion. When faced with an enemy, she could flip the switch on the bracelet, causing the ring to flip over and cover her palm. The bracelet transformed into a wrist guard and forearm armor, while the armband formed upper arm armor. The three connected were powered by an energy block designed by Quinn Corporation, with a theoretical maximum capacity of 10 tons. Thea also designed 3 holes in the palm armor, allowing 3 claws to emerge when she clenched her fist, a move that was, of course, plagiarized from Wolverine. Concerned about the possibility of her coming into the side of the Ninja Master, she felt uncomfortable facing bad guys barehanded, and since she couldn't always carry a sword, this was a makeshift solution. As for whether to use a single robotic arm or 2, she ultimately decided on 1, and like the Winter Soldier, she opted for a left arm. Of course, she wasn't a complete geek. She considered that her right hand would be used for archery and shooting, and no matter how ingenious the robotic arm was, it wouldn't match the dexterity of her own fingers. She simply needed immense strength, and her left arm was more than sufficient. Magic was now out of the public eye, but technological weapons were fine. She didn't waste Batman, a master of mechanical engineering, and took the blueprints to consult him. Bruce could only express admiration for her ingenious idea. He wouldn't use the robotic arm, as it conflicted with his existing equipment, but he could offer some guidance. The two worked together to refine the overall design, incorporating several technological advances from both companies. The new design made the metal arm lighter and more powerful. Batman had some complaints about the design, which concealed claws within the arm to allow for a subtle attack at crucial moments. Thea could only voice her concerns regarding women wearing too little clothing in public and having no place to store their weapons. Bruce, unsure of her constant focus on encountering bad guys, simply accepted the design. Chapter 122, 3 Strikes on Arkham, I. The group rested for 7 days. Given Talia's secret weapon, they had long been eager to charge in, but they waited a full week, worried about Thea, a key player, recovering from a massive loss. As for whether it was okay to go without her, they all felt it was safer to wait a few days, so they decided to wait. During the trip, Thea even took the others to Wayne's private beach for a long photoshoot. It had to be done. They told Moira they were going to Malibu, so they had to get a few photos to make it look good. As she donned her swimsuit, Thea noticed she'd grown a bit taller. She'd had some scars from her martial arts training, but the blood-infused treatment had completely erased those old bruises, leaving her skin firmer and smoother than ever. Europeans and Americans, especially women, have relatively large pores, which might look okay from a distance, but up close, their skin isn't as supple as that of Asian women. Thea's skin was now incredibly smooth and felt incredibly soft to the touch, astonishing her fellow women. Her appearance, previously a 90, was now barely a 95. She had also subtly discussed with Batman that, regardless of the success of the attack, she should return to Star City. Both her role as Moira's campaign mascot and her own college preparation were already on her agenda. Batman, of course, didn't say anything. His assistance was voluntary, and he was grateful for the 2 months of fighting in Gotham. Furthermore, Thea had helped him immensely by removing Talia, who had left him helpless. 7 days later, the main force entered Arkham at dusk. Thea was initially surprised to hear of the nighttime attack. Batman still didn't dare appear in the light of day, but there was no reason to refuse. If you prefer nighttime, then go at night. Batman and Thea had similar command methods, and he wasn't comfortable showing up either. They were both acting as remote controllers of the fearless Commissioner Gordon. Unaware of the enemy's secret weapon, Batman brought whatever equipment he could find. The officers were also a select few. Felicity had previously scouted the area and discovered that all the original Arkham gang members had been wiped out in the previous massacre. Despite the court's efforts, the major mafia families refused to comply, and surprise attacks and clashes were frequent. Concerned that the number of personnel needed for indoor combat was too large, the group decided to bring only 50 veterans and 200 police officers. Thea suppressed her urge to scoff at this number. After all, she wasn't leading them. While Bruce was fluent in Mandarin and Cantonese, it was clear his folklore studies weren't quite up to par. This time, Thea wasn't being overly cautious. Regardless of whether it was an indoor operation or not, she marched out fully armed. The entry into Arkham went remarkably smoothly. The traces of the fire set by Miss Firefly during the previous retreat were still there, destroying a full third of the asylum. Furthermore, the recent gang clashes between several groups meant that the external situation hadn't been properly handled. However, no one was complacent. Batman didn't enter with the main group, seemingly hiding somewhere. Thea and her old partner, Miss Firefly, served as ranged attack forces. Despite their less than favorable reputations, their frequent collaboration had fostered a certain rapport. But the tacit understanding soon disappeared. Batman used some instrument to detect the presence of Mr. Freeze and ordered Firefly to fight him in single combat through the headset. Soon after, the two Claws also jumped out to cause trouble. Batman assigned Barbara and Robin to deal with their old rivals. From time to time, there were gangsters in groups of 3 or 4 shooting cold guns, and the entire team could only keep a few people to deal with them. As they went deeper into Arkham, the number of people around Commissioner Gordon gradually decreased. There were gunshots and explosions everywhere. Is this going to be a war of attrition? Thea also felt that this tactic was very cheating. Even if they won, they would kill 1,000 enemies and lose 800 of their own. But the situation was such that they could only bite the bullet and fight on. With a roar, a guy with green gas all over his body and a big jar on his back rushed out and punched Commissioner Gordon directly in the head. But his punch never landed. A batarang pierced his arm from the side. The dart also had a barb design similar to Thea's, designed to stick once it's lodged. A resilient string was attached to the end, tied to a nearby pillar. If he continued forward, whether he could hit the commissioner or not, his arm would surely be broken. Bane, Batman's deep voice, booming from his perch, reached the others through a voice changer. Thea purred at the sight. You were right behind the team, weren't you? Don't think I didn't sense it? If you spot an enemy, just find a platform and jump on it. Can't you just fight them properly? Aren't you tired of running up so high and pretending to be awesome? You have to be so mysterious. You must have used your grappling gun to get up there, right? And then you jump down after garnering so much admiration? Why bother? Green Arrow has this same peculiar habit. He can't just talk nicely. He has to go to window frames, rooftops, places no one normally goes, to act like a superior. You truly deserve to be the Ninja Master's son-in-law. Despite your appearances, you're still incredibly similar in your disguises. Leave him to me. You guys keep going. There's still space beneath Arkham, Batman commanded into his headset, beginning his fight with Bane. Bane clearly hadn't used Venom to unlock his potential, likely haunted by Thea's previous experience. This time, he was relying solely on his own martial arts skills to fight Batman. Thea took a few looks and admittedly was quite formidable. She couldn't defeat him alone, but if she used her magical double-handed technique, with two Theas attacking, he wouldn't last a minute. Seeing Batman's serious demeanor, Thea had no intention of joining in the fight. Defeating Bane would allow him to regain his unstoppable form, that was his obsession. She and Catwoman, escorting Commissioner Gordon and the remaining men, gradually descended deeper into Arkham. Catwoman quickly found the elevator leading underground, and with her mastery of lockpicking, she quickly opened the door. They encountered no enemies underground, nor did they find the secret weapon Talia had mentioned. Instead, they found a large number of Gotham citizens. There were too many of them, over 1,000, all of whom looked listless, and many had already fainted. Gordon and Thea's team of less than 50 couldn't transport them all. The elevator could only carry a dozen at a time, and the fighting up there was like a battlefield. These people would be courting death if they went out. But seeing that many were in serious condition, with citizens falling unconscious every minute, Gordon, lacking quick wits, automatically looked at Thea, meaning, Batman is busy outside, you need to come up with a plan quickly. Thea pondered for a moment. Felicity, how many meters underground are we? Use 3D modeling to see if there are other passages nearby. It's impossible to transport these thousands of people in one elevator. It would take half a year to transport them. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, 3 Strikes on Arkham, Part 2. There should be an underground passage. Look for it, Batman said into his headset, his voice choppy and intermittent, making one wonder if he was engaging in some kind of exercise. Of course, he still had his integrity, he was only panting because Bane was truly a formidable opponent. Half the officers were assigned to search for an exit, while the rest made makeshift stretchers, focusing on those with limited mobility. Thea and Catwoman sat to rest, watching the old chief frantically rushing about. They quickly found an exit, but it wasn't a broad road, but a deserted sewer. The sewer was vast, as if Gotham had once been a city blessed with abundant rainfall, its underground sewers built tall and sturdy. However, the filthy ground didn't show any signs of recent human activity. Gazing at the pitch-black, abandoned sewer, they were all perplexed. It was too dark down there. What if there was an ambush? We have enough height here. I'll scout on my skateboard. As the currently most powerful officer, Thea had no choice but to take on this unnoticed and arduous task. Catwoman felt a little embarrassed, but she certainly wasn't as swift as Thea. She urged her to be careful, and the two women embraced gently. I'll go in first. Wait for my signal. Thea grabbed some fire starters and a torch, beckoned them, and entered the waterway alone. After a short while, when they could no longer see her, she activated her yin veins. Clone technique, a lifelike shadow floated from her body. In less than a second, it materialized, dressed exactly like her, and looked at Thea with a lifelike look. It was a strange feeling, same body, same mind, different perspectives, like looking in a mirror. The clone's equipment could actually be transformed, but the effect was disappointing. It was just empty. Thea tried the sword the clone carried, but it wasn't as sharp as a nail clipper. She simply abandoned it all and handed over the torch. Thea's original self, still on her skateboard, pointed in the distance and ordered, "Go explore the way." The clone, with a human-like pout, took the torch and continued forward. This is much safer. Thea followed slowly behind, unwilling to put herself in harm's way. If it weren't for the secret technique, she wouldn't have taken on this charge. Less than 10 minutes later, Thea signaled to those behind her. While the smell was unpleasant, no danger was detected. "Selina, you hold the rear, I'll lead the others." The old chief still valued Catwoman's attentiveness. Despite his 60s, he still had a pioneering spirit. He directed a few officers to lead the way, and he followed closely down the wastewater. Although Thea had lit some fires along the way to provide illumination, the team was too numerous. It took 20 minutes of back and forth before the entire group entered the wastewater. Catwoman, seeing that no one had been left behind, quickly followed. Most of the captured Gotham citizens were young and strong. Despite their long captivity, their physical strength was still strong. Now, in order to escape, those who could move were moving at a rapid pace. The headsets were silent, the heroes silently dealing with their enemies. Catwoman, still a little dissatisfied with the pace of progress, was about to ask how far it was to the surface. "Ouch!" Thea's voice came through the headset, startling everyone and asking what was going on. "Oh my god. I'm distracting it, hurry up." Boom, boom. Thea's words were half-uttered before being drowned out by a series of violent noises. "What happened?" Catwoman, now the most idle, hurriedly asked, but no one answered her. "What's your plan?" Batman roared at Bane, but Bane just sneered and remained unmoved. He spotted his weakness and delivered a few more punches. Batman had no choice but to focus on dealing with the enemy in front of him. As the others were frantically trying to figure out what was going on, they heard a muffled sound not far away, a huge tremor both above and below the ground. Hiss. This time, it was Felicity's voice, who was monitoring the situation remotely. Thea blew up the ground, like she blew up the city's gas pipeline. Something's chasing her. What could be chasing her? This thought crossed everyone's mind, and it's no wonder they were surprised. Few enemies in Gotham could defeat a fully armed Thea. "Oh my god," Felicity exclaimed, meaningless. "A 3-meter-tall, humanoid monster is chasing her." Despite her explanation, it was no different from no explanation at all. The group still couldn't figure out what it was. "Hoo-hoo. This thing is incredible. I'll lure it out of the city. You guys hurry out," Thea finally breathed and briefly explained to the group. It had caught her completely off guard. She had been following her clone, dazed, 10 meters away. Suddenly, she felt the clone vanish, and then around the corner, a 3-meter-tall, livid humanoid monster appeared in her sight. European and American sewers are typically built high, so neither the 3-meter-tall enemy nor the suspended Thea was too embarrassed. But now Thea wished the passage were shorter and narrower. This enemy, with muscles like steel, gray skin, and a mop of wispy white hair draped over his shoulders, stared at Thea with crimson eyes. Solomon Grundy, was she mistaken? Facing this massive zombie, dead for over a century, Thea was completely bewildered. This creature shouldn't be coming out now, supposedly possessing superhuman abilities. Could she defeat it? Of course not, Thea understood. This must be the secret weapon Talia had mentioned. Had the Court of Owls somehow preemptively activated the zombie and ambushed it in this waterway, hoping to capture her and her companions in one fell swoop? Fortunately, she had sent a clone to explore the way. Judging by its massive fists, even with the protection of a Kevlar combat suit, a single blow would have been enough to destroy the original. Unwilling to fight it underground, Thea channeled the magic of her black mist dagger, creating a cloud of black mist that even absorbed light and enveloped the large zombie. Unsure of its effectiveness, Thea created a clone and passed by it. The result was satisfactory. The large zombie, thrashing about in the mist, didn't notice the clone slipping by. Without a word, Thea darted over the large zombie's head. After she had flown 30 meters, she feared it might cause trouble for the larger group behind. Although she knew it was invulnerable, she still wanted to use her speed to draw it away and avoid scaring the civilians to death. Drawing her bow and arrow, the target was so large that she didn't even need to aim. Thea fired an arrow into the center of the black mist. Chapter 124, 3 Strikes on Arkham, Part 3. The giant zombie, seemingly sensing the attack, darted out of the black fog, following the arrow's direction. Thea glanced down and saw her own arrow drop to the ground. It was incredibly powerful, barely penetrating her defenses. Without a second's hesitation, she ran. But she had underestimated the giant zombie's immense strength. Its immense power gave it incredible speed, not slowing down even when turning. With its massive body, it could easily catch up to Thea in seconds. Knowing the surroundings were restrictive, Thea controlled her clone to run in the opposite direction, buying herself time. As expected, the giant zombie was bewildered by this action, its clumsy mind struggling to decide which to pursue. Thea couldn't race it through the passageway now, she had to return to the ground and quickly ascend. She surveyed her surroundings, unsheathed a flaming arrow, and aimed it at the nearby gas pipeline. Feeling unsafe, she flung another cloud of black fog into the giant zombie's path, creating a new clone. It handed her a pistol, pointing it at the pipeline. Thea's original form quickly dodged. The next scene was exactly what Felicity had witnessed. A massive tremor shook the entire Arkham area, blasting a massive hole 20 meters deep and 30 meters wide where the pipe had once stood. Thea successfully escaped into the sky, followed by the giant zombie Grundy, who was now visible to everyone. Whoosh, whoosh, Thea fired 2 more icy and flaming arrows, each with little success. The creature was not only invulnerable to weapons but also impervious to water and fire. Add to that its immense strength, and aside from its inability to fly, it had virtually no weaknesses. Thea didn't dare fly too high or too fast. She simply wanted to get the creature out of the city, leaving room for either enlisting the aid of Swamp Thing or for all the remaining heroes to join forces and fight it. She also informed Batman of the situation. While Batman Gordon fully approved of her plan to get the monster out, they were a bit skeptical when she told him that such a powerful monster could exist in Gotham. Fortunately, Batman, knowledgeable and calm, told Thea to be safe and that he and his men would be there soon. Thea had no expectations for his immediate attack. Bane was no easy task. Winning was certainly possible, but the thought of killing him instantly was a dream. Relying on others was better than relying on oneself. Fearing the creature would return to attack those unable to fly, Thea had to periodically slow down and approach to fire a few arrows. While none of them penetrated its defenses, it was better than doing nothing. Through repeated probing, Thea concluded that the creature wasn't as powerful as rumored, or perhaps even quite mindless. She'd imagined Grandy, though a zombie, possessed intelligence, but this creature showed no sign of intelligence at all. Her clumsy provocation sent them scurrying across the city. With one flying and the other running, they quickly left the city and arrived at the southern swamps that had changed Thea's life a few days earlier. They circled the area twice, but it wasn't clear if the swamp monster had gone away or if it felt it couldn't defeat them and dared not come out. It lay as quiet as a wasteland, leaving Thea helpless to continue circling Gotham. To the east lay the sea. Thea tried pulling for another 10 minutes, but the giant creature wasn't quite that foolish. It entered the water, took a few steps, realized it was water, and then turned back. With no other choice, she pulled it westward, calling for support from her companions. The first to arrive were the Sky Eye Society's attack helicopters. They'd been hard-pressed in the city before, but now, out in the countryside, they had no worries. 8 anti-tank missiles accurately struck Randy. As the smoke cleared, the unstoppable giant zombie roared furiously at the helicopter, nearly frightening the Sky Eye Society pilot. "You're scared, right? I've been pulling this giant for a marathon. It's not easy for me, of course." Thea couldn't just sit there and watch her allies die. She fired a few more icy and fire arrows to draw the giant zombie's attention back. Meanwhile, Batman, listening to the battle unfolding in the distance, was terrified. Bane, however, had learned his lesson this time. He didn't need to use his venom to enhance his abilities, relying on his impressive skills to tangle with Batman, trying to keep him there. There was a slight difference in their skill levels, but not a significant one. Bane's sudden burst of power had tricked Batman last time, leading to the broken back incident, so Bruce was playing it safe this time, focusing 40% on attack and 60% on defense. Bane, still a bit frightened by the venom attack, hesitated to exert his full strength. After all, the Court of Owl's mission was to hold Batman back, so there was no need for him to risk his life. Batman could guess at his thoughts, he thought, raising his hand and throwing a smoke bomb. Huh? Bane's reaction was also quick. His first instinct was to run, but that wouldn't happen. He used the throws he'd learned from his days in the underworld boxing scene, lunging at his opponent's waist. "You've been fooled." Batman's smoke bombs were all feints. He had anticipated Bane's lunge, and with a swift thrust of his left hand, he grabbed the respirator mask from his face, ripping it off with a forceful movement of his wrist. The excruciating pain sent Bane scurrying out of the smoke. His mask wasn't a surgical procedure, but had been surgically connected to his facial nerves. The nerves had been severely damaged by the violent removal, affecting brain function and leaving him momentarily disoriented. Seeing his face covered in blood, his eyes clouded, and much of the skin around his mouth torn, Batman knew he had won and pounced, beating him hard. He tied up his nemesis with his own special ropes and hurriedly called Thea to inquire about her situation. Thea's condition was certainly not good, but it wasn't that bad. After all, the giant zombie couldn't fly, while the skateboard had near infinite power. In response to Batman's questioning, she said, "Think before you come. This guy is invulnerable, so if you want to take pictures, you'd better wait." She and the Sky Eye's helicopters were coordinating fairly well, pulling the giant zombie from the south to the west of the city in a relay-like manner, and now they were moving north again. Over the phone, she could only say, "We can hold on, so you guys should figure something out." After finding out her location, Batman didn't bother checking out his comrades. He quickly boarded his Batfighter. His equipment was equipped with tracking devices, having retrieved them a few days ago while Bane was in seclusion. The supersonic Batfighter quickly reached the battlefield. Seeing Solomon Grundy for the first time startled him. This thing didn't look like a lab product, but rather something naturally derived. How could such a thing exist near his own Gotham? He believed Thea and the others' claims of invulnerability, but just to test it himself and gather more data, he unleashed a barrage of bullets from his machine gun. Chapter 125, 3 Strikes on Arkham, Part 4. The Batfighter was practically the pinnacle of Earth's aircraft, boasting speed, powerful firepower, and ease of use. Even Doomsday, at full speed, couldn't catch it in the future Dawn of Justice battle. Now, facing the pale, muscled, giant zombie, Grundy, it was a complete speed crusher. Even with Thea's superhuman visual acuity, she could only see a fleeting shadow. Then, a fierce burst of machine gun fire followed, raining down a torrent of bullets on the zombie's head, eyes, heart, and other vitals. Solomon Grundy had no protection against the sudden attack and screamed in agony. The intense fire lasted for half a minute, bullet casings raining down on the ground. Metal rounds, flame rounds, armor-piercing rounds, and all kinds of ammunition pelted the giant zombie with impunity. From time to time, the sound of explosions echoed to Thea, accompanied by Grundy's screams. She truly was a poor man. Uncle Bruce had thrown out at least millions in those 30 seconds. What a man. The scene was filled with smoke and flames. Several people flew away, carefully examining the Batplane's work. Roar, the large zombie stumbled out of the smoke. It was clear that the crossfire had taken some damage. Its right eye was blinded, and its arms and shoulders were damaged to varying degrees. Bullet holes dotted its pale skin, but none penetrated, suggesting the bullets had been stopped in the muscle. Not a drop of blood fell from the wounds, and the creature was still wriggling, attempting to repair the holes. "It seems to be healing, quite quickly," Thea said, turning the detection function on her glasses to maximum. She felt a little disgusted by the white, dead flesh, but she warned him anyway. "Did your freezing work on it?" Batman, of course, saw it too, and he was also frustrated. The repair was too fast. In just a few seconds, the blinded eye had grown back. His batplane was mostly used for travel, not as a fighter, and it didn't have a large ammunition storage capacity. "Partially, but this thing is incredibly strong and will break free." To give him a clear view, Thea sprinted forward. From 200 meters away, she launched an arrow, which lodged itself in the zombie's shoulder. The freezing effect was decent, but it was quickly dispelled by the creature's force. Batman examined it for a moment. "It seems to slow its recovery." His words were utter nonsense. Any atomic structure could be frozen, and once frozen, there was no way to recover. Thea muttered to herself, but didn't respond. "Do you have any good ideas?" Batman didn't address his thoughts directly, but asked with the perspective of an elder regarding his junior. The best approach would be to recruit a few particularly powerful individuals to confront it head-on, but the Master certainly wouldn't do that. Lasers won't be very effective against it, and nuclear weapons can't be deployed easily. I think finding a place to freeze it, burying it deep underground might work. Honestly, this idea was similar to Bruce's. His plan was to lure it in through a valley, block both ends, and then pour high-speed concrete into it. It wasn't a matter of who was more clever, both were cunning tactics exploiting the giant zombie's inability to fly. Both schemes had merit, but also flaws. Thea didn't have many arrows, and there weren't any valleys of suitable size near Gotham. Just as he was debating which plan to use, Catwoman's voice rang over the comms. "Claws escaped. But we've managed to capture Mr. Freeze. Can we use his freezing abilities?" Catwoman's voice was definitely not steady, and one could tell they had put some effort into capturing Mr. Freeze. This was good news. Thea's freezing arrows were only a lasting solution, they had no long-term potential. Magic was still a taboo, and she didn't know the kind of spells that could summon wind, rain, fireballs, and ice cones. Even that kind of magic had vanished from the world. How could a fireball, no matter how powerful, be as powerful as a missile? Magic was more about secrecy and undefendability. Okay, then, let's use the freezing method. Batman also felt that searching for deep pits across the mountains wasn't going to be easy. If he accidentally strayed into another superhero's territory, he'd be embarrassed. He then discussed specific measures with Thea over the comms channel, only to discover a number of problems. First, Mr. Freeze's gun didn't have that long a range. Even though Catwoman and the others had removed his helmet and held a dagger to his neck, threatening him to fight, he was helpless. The gun's maximum range was only 50 meters, it wasn't designed for combat. Honestly, that was incredibly close range. Grundy's superpowers were too threatening. Throwing something like a car or street sign could be incredibly lethal. At 50 meters, even Thea, with her impressive reflexes, didn't dare approach, let alone Mr. Freeze, whose reaction times were ridiculously slow due to his icy nature. This was simply a death sentence. Batman certainly wouldn't be so inhumane, and Mr. Freeze wouldn't foolishly charge in and throw himself at someone. How do we limit its mobility? The question loomed in their minds. In theory, utilizing the principle of thermal expansion and contraction, Thea's combination of freezing and flaming arrows, occasionally interspersed with high-strength armor-piercing arrows, could inflict considerable damage on the giant zombie. Atomic structures are fragile under the effects of fluctuating temperatures, and no matter how powerful a giant zombie is, it's still a carbon-based organism, not some conceptual entity. Similarly, Batman could deal damage to the giant zombie regardless of the damage, but the two billionaires simultaneously opted for other solutions, believing that such actions were simply throwing money into the water and wouldn't be considered until the very last moment. "I've captured Dr. Hugo from the asylum. He says they fished this zombie out of the rising river. Its consciousness hasn't fully recovered, but a virtual personality they've forcibly implanted is controlling its body." Commissioner Gordon shared his gathered intelligence, but it wasn't helpful for the situation. Thea had long suspected that Grundy wasn't as powerful as rumored, and looked rather foolish. When she heard the rising river waters, she felt a chill run down her spine. Was this the hidden boss I summoned by calling rain? Thea listened indifferently as Commissioner Gordon recited the various experimental parameters. It was clear the Court of Owls were quite capable. Fearing they couldn't control the massive zombie, they combined radiation technology with brainwashing to create a pseudo-personality to control the zombie's movements. However, this persona was too fragile, or perhaps Grundy's body was too powerful. After a brief period of control, the zombie went into a state of severe turmoil. They had no choice but to hastily evacuate Arkham, leaving the entire situation to the heroes who followed. This was a classic case of killing without burying. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.